Okay, good morning. A bit loud. We'll start the meeting now. First of all, just a reminder, any phones, if you could please turn them off or put them on silent so we don't disturb any speakers. And also, yeah, we got the, let's come out of that speaker as well.
Has anyone got their microphone on? Oops. I think it's just a case.
Echoing, too close. Okay. Firstly, also, I'd like to welcome our new members to our committee, Andrew and Jenny, and also Becca's in her new role is returning. And then we'll move on to the first item, which is apologies for absence. Currently, Councillor Overton can't make it, and Councillor Batstone is kindly substituting. Councillor Barlow can't attend and was unfortunately couldn't find a substitute. And we've also got Karen Fuller, who is being ably replaced by Victoria Banham. Okay, item 2 on the agenda. Any members got any declarations of interest on the items on the agenda? No, thank you very much. Item 3 is the minutes from the previous meeting. Those who attended the last meeting, are you happy for me to sign them as a true record? Okay, fantastic. Item 4 is petitions and public addresses. We've got no one registered to speak. So we move straight on to the first substantial item of the agenda, which is the community grants, the community capacity grants. For there, we've got, I just said Victoria Barron, we've got Izzy Rockingham, and we've also got from Laura Price, CEO of Oxfordshire Community and Voluntary Action, Zoe Springins, CEO of Oxfordshire Community Foundation, and Emily Lewis-Edwards, joint CEO of Community First Oxfordshire. The committee has resigned this item is in a response to a request for more details about grant allocation and grant successes. Who wants to present that? Councillor Fletcher? Or?
Thank you. What a start. Okay, so this is about our community capacity grants. We've got an update on the programme, and I know that some of our members have taken interest in this before. It's about a £900,000 programme, and it's about backing local community groups to help people stay independent and connected. Since it was launched in 2022, it's supported 275 projects, and we've reached over 30,500 people across the county. The strength of the programme is how local and flexible it is. So it's small grants from like 5,000 up to 20,000, supporting lunch clubs and befriending services and social prescribing projects. I love this programme. It's funded through adults and public health, but it's very much delivered in partnership. So I'm very pleased that we have our representatives from our lovely partners here with us today and officers to talk through what's working well and then where we can go from here. So I'm going to hand over to Izzy or to you.
So thank you. I just wanted to say, so Victoria Barron, Deputy Director for Adult Social Care, and I just wanted to say on behalf of Karen Fuller, I know for the lineup today, she very much wanted to be here, but with a long-standing leave arrangement, unfortunately couldn't be here, but she does send her apologies, but wishes everybody well. I think that the community capacity grants, absolutely, they align so beautifully with our vision and our strategy around the Oxfordshire way. This really is about local, small, grassroots-led activity that really supports people in their local community. So I won't talk for very long. I know that Izzy's got some slides just to help us go through the paper. And then obviously, as I say, we have our brilliant colleagues here today who can talk in more detail and support questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria and Councillor Fletcher. Hi everyone, just to remind you, I'm Izzy Rockingham. I'm Head of Joint Commissioning for Older People and the Grants Programme falls within my remit. As has been said already, the programme itself is around strengthening grassroots organisations and supporting people in their own communities, which of course has a strategic alignment for the Oxfordshire Way and also our age well priorities in the health and wellbeing strategy. So around supporting our older residents, particularly in their independence, and also fostering capacity within our local communities to reduce isolation and loneliness. And in terms of impact and reach of the programme, the programme has been able to support almost 300 projects since it was launched in 2022, so has made a real difference to local communities. We received a request to update on this specific programme, and we received quite a few questions in advance. So I'll just take you through some of the key messages of the paper, but also in response to some of the questions that we've received. So as a very brief overview of the structure of the programme, so there are two main funding streams within the total overall budget of almost £1 million in 25-26. So we have the Communities Fund, Connected Communities Fund, which is our smaller grants programme, and that's administered by OCVA and CFO. Apologies, there's a lot of acronyms today, but that's almost a total of £192,000, and smaller communities can apply for grants of up to £5,000. We then have the second stream, if you like, of the programme, which totals just over £500,000, and that is larger grants, which is administered by our partner OCF. And I think a key element of the programme is the partnership working piece. So one of the questions we were asked in advance is how do we work with our voluntary sector communities, and how does the inner workings of the programme happen? And I think it's important to flag that we took a strategic decision when we were designing this programme, that our voluntary sector partners would administer and manage the funds instead of the county council, simply because of their local knowledge and expertise on managing grants, their relationships, very established relationships with our community partners. We have a really rich landscape in Oxfordshire. We're really fortunate, but the council isn't necessarily the best organisation to properly reach into those groups and establish local needs. So that was a strategic decision made in the initial design of the programme. Part of that decision also has meant that the programme can expand beyond its original scope. So as part of the development of the programme, our voluntary sector partners have managed to facilitate private donor fund matching as well. So we've had almost £300,000 extra to what was originally in the budget, facilitated by private donors, which is something that the county council wouldn't necessarily have been able to deliver. And it's worth noting as well that while our voluntary sector partners here today do administer the grants programme, the county council is still very much involved in the development of the programme year on year. We work in partnership and we adapt the programme based on what we're hearing from community groups, and we are involved in the evaluation panel for the grants each year, particularly for the larger grants programme as well. I don't know if partners wanted to add anything more on the inner workings of the programme or anything. Yeah, of course, yeah.
Sorry. Thank you. Thanks, Lizzie. Yeah, just to add, I'm Laura from OCVA, and the distinction between the two grants provides a really great opportunity to work with communities, because the small grant route that we administer alongside Community First is a rolling grants programme. So rather than everybody putting in their applications and then hearing on a certain date whether they've been successful or not, we accept rolling applications, and then there's an opportunity for groups who might be smaller, be entirely volunteer led, to work with our community development officers within our two organisations to work on their budget, work on their wider sustainability plan, and that's really helpful because it gives us a route in to talk about those wider strengthening issues for the organisations. And so the two different wings of the programme work together quite well to scale up and down depending on the size and style of organisation.
I'm Zoe from Oxfordshire Community Foundation. So yeah, just to say in terms of the leveraging the private donors, so we there's a community foundation every county, so we have about 35 high net worth individuals where we look after their funds, and then dozens others who give in as businesses and individuals. And I think it's true, they would never voluntarily say, I'd like to give an extra 100,000 to the county council, however much that is needed. But if we go to them and say, look, we've run this incredible programme, it was 4 or 5 times oversubscribed, completely focused on the priorities of community capacity, that then motivates them to say, well, that seems a fantastic application and I'll step in because public funding hasn't stretched that far. So we found it really powerful. And also, although we do a big push at the time that the funds open, we keep those applications on our books for the whole year and keep bringing them up to our donors. So again, it's not a sort of one bang and over. But it is one panel where the council participates, which, as Laura says, is different to the smaller one, which is more supportive to the groups.
Thank you both. So just to give an overview of some of the activities that are funded. So the paper identifies that the programme funds a range of activities which are based on local needs. It's that really grassroots kind of bottom-up approach to supporting local communities. But there are some key outcomes of the programme which we've worked in partnership with voluntary sector partners to develop, and that's on the improving wellbeing and reducing isolation elements. So this just gives you a breakdown of the split, I guess, of some of the activities funded, both in the larger grants and smaller grants programmes as well. So you can see that there's a real mix of reducing social isolation and loneliness, physical activity, which particularly for older people, we know that building strength and physical mobility can help reduce the risk of falls, and then lots in there on community-based socialising and supporting health and wellbeing too. So this is so we can talk to you from this room about the impact of the programme, but we wanted to include some of the stories of the people using those activities and some of the schemes that have been funded. The paper talks about the kind of difficulties almost of measuring impact at a larger scale, because it's the focus of this programme is that hyper local need element. So the way that we manage impact is that we triangulate with known evidence. So as I've just said, in terms of reducing risk of falls, for example, we know that building strength and activity classes can help reduce that risk. We also triangulate with the lived experience and the qualitative feedback of people using those services. So you can see a mix of that feedback there as well. And then finally, just on some challenges, opportunities and next steps. So the 25-26 programme and evaluation process is currently underway, and we're planning for the 26-27 round of the programme as we speak. It's worth noting that the programme is oversubscribed every year, which I think reflects the kind of value and the importance of it for our grassroots communities. However, it's also worth noting that the funding is only confirmed for 26-27. And fortunately, we find ourselves in an incredibly difficult financial context. And so quite naturally, we may have to make some difficult decisions about the future of the programme. But for now, we are focusing on the 26-27 round and ensuring it can be the best that it can be. Secondly, so we also had a question around the alignment of the funding across the Oxfordshire system and some of how it aligns with some of the other priorities and funding streams. So it's worth noting, as we've said already, that this is an open grants programme, so it's aligned to strategic priorities in terms of the health and wellbeing strategy that we've talked to, and outcomes, but ultimately it is focused on that hyper local need. So while if I as a commissioner was commissioning a service across the whole county, I would look at the whole population need and commission based on that. This is a kind of startup fund for local communities to test and try and develop their in response to local needs. So it's a bit of a different model. However, we do recognise, and as part of the evaluation process for the grants each year, we consider some of the interconnected funding streams. So, for example, the Well Together programme and the focus in the the 10 deprived wards in Oxfordshire. So as a result of that, to make sure that we get a breadth of organisations supported through the fund, we shifted the focus slightly for last year and the previous year's funding to focus on communities outside of those wards so that we spread that resource. I also wanted to note that, as I've said, this is a really rich, complex landscape that we're really proud of in Oxfordshire. It means that from a county perspective, it can be quite difficult to coordinate all of the different grants and opportunities that are happening. However, I think the local government reorganisation and the development of neighbourhood health and care on the NHS side is a real opportunity for us to improve that coordination piece and improve how we work with the voluntary sector. So internally, we're currently doing an activity to map all of the grants available in the county council, but also in our districts, in recognition that the landscape is quite complex, which in turn can be quite complex for our voluntary sector partners. And so given the financial context as well, what we want to do is make sure that the money we put into this is of the most value. And so there is an element there of improving how we coordinate that. I don't know, colleagues, if you wanted to add anything else, otherwise I can pause and open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I wasted a lot of time writing questions that you've answered half of them. I won't be offended. Just before I come to Council Heritage and Hannah Beach, can I just ask one, just from a personal perspective, in South Oxfordshire, we get grants, but both bigger grants and councillor grant schemes where we can give out individually. One of the things I struggle with is if you give it to the same group a number of times, they almost accept it as revenue then, and suddenly when you say, well, I'm giving it to different groups this year, I've only got a limited amount of spending, suddenly we'll have to cancel the event then, and you know, or the service, which sort of guilt trips. How do you deal with that sort of thing? Is it because I was, especially with LGR coming up, you know, I don't want groups to sort of start getting used to having the money and possibly losing it. So
I think actually one of the really interesting things that we've noted over the years that we've been delivering this funding is that actually it's not the same list of groups every time, not just in terms of who we're awarding to, but who's applying. And I think what we've found on, you know, some groups do come back and it is a kind of, you know, a continuity relationship, but actually overwhelmingly there's movement around that. And I think that quite often the funding helps them move to another level. It helps them build relationships with us as infrastructure organisations that might lead to them having a successful application to National Lottery, or having a successful application to a separate funded community foundation initiative. And we've also seen a really nice shift where some organisations have started off with one of the small grants, and then they've developed what they're doing, and then they've qualified the following year for a larger grant that actually helps them bake in some sustainability. I think the other point to make is that I think we recognise that in the voluntary sector, funding is always going to be a mosaic of where people are pulling in funding from, and that's the nature of the sector. And it's also bolstered and strengthened by the income that many organisations are raising themselves directly from individual giving, or from organisations where people pay a small nominal amount for an activity and strengthening that work. But also the value that isn't just a handover of cash, but the number of volunteers that are involved in that activity. So I think that worry about kind of creating a dependency is always there in the sector. But the reality is that the sector's strength is its flexibility, and actually most organisations are used to that ebb and flow of where funding might be available for that year. So I think that sometimes it starts out as a bigger worry, but the reality of how organisations exist is that it's a little bit more flexible than that.
That's lovely to hear. I mean, I chaired, one of my first things I ever chaired was community grants at South Oxfordshire, and I must admit, trying to dive into one of the groups, and they just thought it was fundraising season. They didn't really have any detail. They just wanted some extra money for, and that was a grass group. But I see you use the Cornerstone, who are fantastic, and they're the opposite. You know, they use it. They come with a very specific. This is what I'm going to use it for. So, as Councillor Fletcher said earlier, this is one of the pleasurable sides of being a councillor and working with grants and so forth. So, right, enough time then. Councillor Heritage.
Thank you. And to be fair, I think that was a very comprehensive report, and it's excellent work. So you probably have answered most questions really, and I thank you for that. I'm a South Oxfordshire district councillor as well, like Councillor Snowdon, and so I'm involved in grants on a personal basis. So I was really keen to read this report, and I'm very supportive of what you do, and I'm very proud of the grants packages around Oxfordshire that we're able to offer, and the work that goes into that. So I was just really interested to read the report generally. A few things I just you did answer a lot of things, but I noticed that I'm always banging on about rural inequalities, and I can see that you're doing a lot of outreach work to ensure that grants are reaching perhaps communities that may not always be aware of them. But Councillor Snowdon might remember that in our last SODC full council meeting, we had some debate and discussion on certain areas around deprivation in rural areas, and one councillor commented that if you're deprived in a rural area, you're really deprived. So I was just curious to know, if there is any specific sort of outreach work that you undertake in our rural communities who may not be so aware of services and opportunities, but also if you're offering the grants on a kind of rolling grants basis, which I fully appreciate can be very effective, how does it work in terms of the funding, and do you kind of exhaust resources quite quickly? And also, I understand you're oversubscribed, which is completely, understandable. So I'm interested with your applications, do the majority of them meet the criteria when they make the application, or is there work behind the scenes to ensure that information support goes out sort of in advance to advise applicants and ensure that when they're applying for the grants? I realise how labour intensive this can be, and I'm just interested to know the support and advice that's offered to ensure that applicants do meet the criteria and understand the grants packages. Sorry, that was a bit of a rush of comments there, but I was very interested in the report.
Thank you. I'll cover the rural bit. All of our 3 organisations cover Oxfordshire, so we're county-wide, and we're very, very aware of rural inequalities, rural deprivation, and we already have quite good contacts in lots of those areas, just because we've been around for a long time. So if you look at the split where the funding has gone, it's relatively equal across all of the districts. It does vary with each year. And if we are aware of capacity building issues, then we'll tend to reach out to those particular communities. So we are very much on it. And also, just slightly separate to this, we're very aware how important infrastructure is, that local infrastructure support for these groups, because we know volunteers are very low in numbers. So we're just going to offer a bit more support through lottery funding through our Small and Mighty, and that has got a rural focus as much as it has urban.
I'll pick up on the rolling nature of the grants. So generally, the funds have tended to launch around the sort of early autumn, so September, kind of early October time. And for the rolling grants, we've normally dispersed all of the funding by the end of the financial year. And I think that your question about how the criteria and the application process, again, having our development officers within our team, and we have the initial point of contact is actually just an expression of interest, so it's not a grant application form per se. It's about someone saying, this is the work that we're doing and this is how we think it aligns with what you're asking for, and then we initiate a conversation then about that, and we tease out with them, what they're thinking of in terms of budget, what the project longevity is. We also talk to them about how realistically they might be able to measure the impact of what they're doing, because there will be those requirements, and it is really important to hear those voices coming through. So it's quite a kind of handheld process to make sure that actually the good work that we know is happening, isn't necessarily always within an organisation that's got paid staff and people with kind of experience of running complex budgets. And so I think that quite often people might come to us with a sense of how they meet the criteria, but it's really good to have that conversation with them to understand in a bit more detail what the work that they're doing, whether that be a dance group or a cookery class, is actually feeding into how, as a county, we're addressing some of those inequalities and some of those preventative issues that we know kind of impact people's outcomes further down the line.
Thank you. I think that hand holding is really important, and that advice and support. So thank you for answering those questions.
So if I could just say, just because you asked about the oversubscription as well, and so also to say, so OCF, we have the one application with the large grants, but before that, because the council gives us funding to administer that, we run in-person drop-in sessions, virtual drop-in sessions. Together, we all travel around the county doing drop-in sessions in every district so that people can meet us throughout the year and get onto our books and have advice. We run a phone line, email advice line. So we're trying to help groups do their best. That has positive and difficult consequences. So we had 115 eligible applications in the 2025 round. We weed out the ones that aren't eligible, maybe not too high income, not in the area. 107 of those, so 93%, were good or excellent. I think that's because we've been given a lot of support, because that's increased over the years. And we had to say no to the majority of those. Having said that, in the last few years, we've said no to 80% because there wasn't the funding, because the council significantly increased the funding in the last year with public health funding. This year, we were able to say yes to 39 out of the 115. So that's also a much better experience for groups. But then we also ported some of the applications over to our cost of living support grants as well. So people who were good but weren't amazing, we said to them, look, we'll help you apply to our next grants round. And so that's one of the benefits of being able to link it into other grants rounds.
Yeah, thank you. The statistics really help as well, and that's really comprehensive. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hannaby was next.
Yes, thank you. Well, it's really delightful to see you, Laura, as well, who's been on this journey when we first started with the Oxfordshire Way. I'm sorry Karen's not here, but congratulations for what you are doing. But I do have, obviously they're difficult times, and further on in that we're going to have to look at some difficult issues here. So I'm really wanting to ask about the administration of the grants, the 96,600. Where does that come in? How is that made up of? Have you got a lot of, I mean, we've got volunteers, but how is that used? How is that divvied out between yourselves, and what does it go on? That's number one. And the other is, as soon as you say falls and you're doing the falls and everything, that was an NHS. That should have been NHS, and they sort of stopped that, if you remember, very early on. They stopped that programme, and you've taken it up. So do you have funding from them, and do you work closely with the NHS? I suppose that's my two. I'm sure there's people that say.
I'll just start on the question about the sort of additional funding for resource. I think Zoe just touched on some of it there about the fact that it gives our infrastructure organisations that opportunity to do that hand-holding. So we do specifically employ additional staff within our organisation, additional hours, so that they can be entirely focused on this programme. And as we've sort of explored, you know, it can be very time consuming to work with a group that might not have held a grant before, or might not have had the experience of the reporting requirements. But the fact that we've seen some of those groups grow in confidence and be successful in other funding is just a really good byproduct of that as well. And then also there are just, you know, costs around actually holding and dispersing funding, in terms of, you know, paying for the bookkeeping and accountancy time and the bank transfers. We make because we're doing a rolling fund, we make payments on a weekly basis to organisations that are qualified. So quite often we're processing sort of, you know, 10 10 sort of small grant payments in a week. So again, in sort of small organisations ourselves, that comes with a cost. So so that's essentially sort of to provide that additional dedicated time and ring-fenced resource for not just actually getting the funding out there, supporting people to that point in the first place, supporting the reporting and the feedback to county, and then once the funding's been dispersed for the rest of the year, collecting all of the impact reporting and the demographic data, so that we've got some really good data that then can be used not just to look at the impact of this fund, but to build a wider case about the impact of prevention, which then slightly leads on to your question, Jenny, about input from health. So you know, I think that probably they have been a little bit out of the picture over the years, but actually since the work through the Integrated Care Board has developed, you know, one of those outcomes was securing that 1.3 million for those 10 priority wards through the Well Together programme, and so there were definitely intersections there. Sadly, that fund has been wound down again. You know, I think we're always facing the challenge of short-term funding when we know that communities actually want long-term solutions, but it did actually give us a really good opportunity to build that relationship with health, and they're also facing really difficult financial decisions at the moment, but it's really good that things like the Connected Communities Fund and the legacy of Well Together are being spoken about in places like the Place-Based Partnership and through the Health and Wellbeing Board as well. So I think that we're, you know, a few years in, and the impact that we've been gathering, we're in a better place to make the case for how these groups add that value to that vision that's coming out nationally for the 10-year plan and neighbourhoods, as well as Izzy touched on.
So have you got a way of measuring how much you might be saving the NHS with the activities that you're doing? I mean, if we're going to try and make a case for getting more money from you from other areas, because as you know, county are having to look at themselves at the moment. So when you sit on the wellbeing board, etc., no one sits on the health? Oh, good. Okay. I expect Victoria will tell me in a minute. So really, do you think you could say how much you're saving the NHS, but with all your activity and mental health, etc.? Because I think we as councillors, because I haven't got the portfolio and I've gone on to other ways, I don't really get that feeling of what's going on. And I wondered if we should, sorry, Chair.
The officers are ready to jump in. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. You know, Chair, that we keep an eye on that and get, yes, thank you very much. Right, I'll stop rambling then and let you answer the question.
Thank you, Councillor Hannavy. And I think, so I'll start, and I know Izzy will also have comments here as well. I think it's really important to note that sort of the impetus behind these grants and the impetus behind this work is to think about, say, the rural communities that we have, the areas where we want to do something that is slightly different, that is small, that is grassroots. I think that drawing a direct parallel, I mean, as I think the paper outlines, the ability to draw direct impact from a specific programme, I think is in and of itself challenging. And I think we have to recognise that actually as a system, we do need to work together. So if you take something, for instance, like Falls, yes, there is absolutely the health component of that needs to be addressed and dealt with, but there are also the kind of wider determinants. Is somebody's housing correct? Is somebody's social situation correct? Is there enough street lighting where they are? And so on and so forth. So I think that to be able to delineate in this type of activity very much to, and people will know very well, I'm a very passionate advocate of ensuring that the correct funding is coming from the correct stream, and that we have you know, our priorities, and we are all pulling our weight in the system, as it were. But I'm not sure that you can draw the direct parallel with this in the way that we're asking, because this is fundamentally about working with people at a very community localized level to deliver what is needed in that community as defined by the community themselves. I think that's, yeah. Izzy, do you want to?
Yes, I agree. So I lead on the Better Care Fund for Oxfordshire, and one of the metrics there is preventing non-elective admissions to hospital. And that is a system-wide metric. So how are we doing as a whole in Oxfordshire? And so just the kind of parallel between those hyper-local community interventions versus the impact on that system-wide metric, it's very difficult to draw a distinction, and frankly not quite fair on those local community groups, because as Victoria said, there's lots of different factors that can influence whether someone has a fall. So they could go to a very effective community exercise class, for example, but then still fall over because the pavements are uneven. So it's not necessarily fair to ask our community groups to be able to draw that distinction. We have in the past tried to add more in terms of the impact development piece. However, as we've touched on already, because the groups are really small, that administrative burden got quite unwieldy and was disproportionate to the amount of funding that those groups were receiving. So it is definitely a balance between making sure that we monitor impact, and as I said, we triangulate with known evidence and qualitative feedback from the people using the services, but also making sure that we apply that lens proportionally, because the focus of the grants is that smaller grassroots startup funding in response to a very local need. But I think so I'm joint NHS and county council funded, so a double hatter. So my view is that if we are supporting people in their own communities and supporting their independence and well-being, that's a system saving for all of us, which again is difficult to quantify, but very aligned with the ethos of the Oxfordshire Way, making sure that we treat the Oxfordshire pound as an Oxfordshire pound rather than solely focused on an individual organisation.
Zoe, you want to come in?
Thank you. Yes, and I've spent a lot of my career doing monitoring and evaluation, and used to be a civil servant, and I know how important it is to justify to the public how money is being spent. I want to say, first of all of the interventions we're funding are completely evidence-based. They're from the health and wellbeing strategy. So we know that loneliness and isolation can lead to everything from heart disease, stroke, high blood pressure, disability. We know the importance of having community spaces. We know the benefits of physical activity. So we're absolutely focused on funding groups that deliver those interventions. So it's not sort of just saying, what could a community group do? Let's do that. So the interventions are evidence-based. We also know the evidence that the smallest community groups, the 91% of groups who have an income under $1 million, who will never get anywhere near a council contract because they don't have the teams, they don't have the knowledge, they offer incredible services, because if you walk into that food bank and they can see that you have got bruises, or you start talking about the problems that you're having with your child, they don't say, well, that's not us. They look at you completely holistically. They don't do means testing, which often makes people not want to step into a door. They don't feel like a GP, which feels like, gosh, if I mention something about my kid, what's going to happen? So we know that the things that they're doing, and we know that the nature of what they are, small grassroots group, deliver incredible benefits to people. The thing is, and not to get too granular, but let's say they're mainly working with adults who didn't complete education, have special educational needs, don't speak English as a first language. When you give them a survey, or let's say, particularly with this, we see a lot of adults with dementia, there is no way of getting them to complete that survey in a meaningful way. And what we heard from lots of groups is that they finally built this trusting relationship, and then you put the survey in front of the person and go, can you just tell me, have you thought about suicide in the last few weeks? So we just have to really find a measurement technique that works. And I think most of all, it's, did the activities happen, and did people come along? And did they think it was worthwhile? Because if we know the intervention matters, and we know that the group delivering it matters, and in the end, we're only often giving them 10 grand. We give our health trust millions and billions, and it's often hard to tell. It's really hard to track impact. Anyway.
Thank you. Just before I come, I've got Councillor Evans and Councillor Coles. Just on that point, though, at the end of the day, we are a scrutiny committee, and our job is to deep dive, and we are spending a lot of public money, and we maybe want to grab some more. We might say look into ways of cutting. So what evidence do we actually have to genuinely that we are genuinely preventing or delaying the need for care? Is there any, have you got ways of showing that so that we can sort of sell it,
So and I will turn back to my colleagues who will no doubt have comments on this, but I think that there is the question that sits before us a lot of the time is, so how do we reach rural groups, and how do we reach communities where perhaps there isn't an off-the-shelf service, as it were, that supports individuals. And I think that there's a real relationship between understanding that there is this, if we were to take this away, what would that mean for that community, for that group, for that, and if we understand that in terms of the wider determinants of health, as colleagues have already referenced. So for instance, we know that social isolation, for instance, is absolutely appalling for your health. It does lead to increased GP visits. It's why social prescribing up and down the county is so popular and is so fundamental in a lot of practices. So I think that we, as I say, have to think about it in that context. We know that we have data that tells us, we do analyse what is the need in a particular area. So the evidence base is there, that we know that there may be a gap in, for instance, a social interaction opportunity, an exercise opportunity. And we know that getting people to that type of activity will have an impact if we look at it on aggregate. But what I think, the question about how do we say for, as colleagues have said, for that particular £10,000 there in that particular group, how do we then survey those individuals? I think there's a way to go in terms of evidencing particular outcome.
But my example is like the cornerstone, for example, that's a service that most of the men that go there, I know I was out the other day with a couple of them, they weren't getting any help whatsoever, and that has helped them. So it's surely just a little bit of evidence, the fact that we're supporting a group that has, those numbers would, help us to, in my opinion. Sorry, I don't want to hold this up. I'm going to go on to Councillor Evans after this.
Yeah, so we do so this report is kind of built on the back of our separate individual reports that if you haven't had a chance to see them, then do go and have a look at them over the last few years, because they're a really rich mix of qualitative and quantitative data. So we do support organisations to do in the first instance a demographic form, so that we can actually see the profile of the people that are attending and look at the targeting of some underserved groups and how we're kind of addressing that gap. We then have the sort of impact survey where people do answer some of those questions about, has this helped them to get out the house more than once a week and that sort of thing. So there's evidence there that then ties into that wider statement that Victoria and Zoe have both talked about, where there's national and international evidence about what the impact of somebody continuing to have ongoing social interaction are. But then also crucially for a lot of those organisations, and you saw a few quotes on the screen, we do that qualitative research as well. So our team go out and meet with those groups in person. They record conversations with people and reflect that back. And I think it's really important to understand that kind of impact reporting is not just nice to have or woolly. It is academically recognised. And on the Well Together programme, actually, there was an independent study commissioned with Oxford University in the Health Humanities Department to look at the impact of that sort of funding on health inequalities. And they focused very heavily on that sort of qualitative research, because from an academic rigor standard, it is impactful, and hearing those individual stories of how people's lives are being impacted on a daily basis by having somewhere to go, having healthy food to eat, being able to keep their body moving, is really impactful. So I think what we try and do is marry up, a bit of the numeric stuff with the real impact stories. to tell that picture of what's happening in our communities. But what we don't do is take that leap of saying, and we can turn that into a calculation that says this is saving the NHS, you know, £2 for every patient, because in all honesty, I don't think any of us feel that that would be fair or realistic, and it just might drive us down a path of trying to do something that's quite counterproductive.
Could I, on the cornermen point, so we've been supporting them through other grants as well. I think they're a perfect example. So like fantastic sort of boxing club for men in Didcot. I think one member of staff and only became a registered charity in the last year or so. So the thing is, you've got one person who's like, right, I'm sort of managing the books, I'm managing the volunteer list, I'm having chats with people when they come in. We actually had a really good conversation with the cornermen to say, have you thought about using a survey? Here's one that you could use. But there's not even there's no professional M&E person in these organisations. And so I think it ends up being a zero-sum game of, is it delivery time or is it monitoring time? And I think, as you say, like the scrutiny is really important. It's something I've done in other organisations is you say, okay, we'd have to give an extra 5 or 10% in money to fund monitoring and evaluation. We're not going to do that for all of these grantees, but can we pick a couple who'd like to be the sample where we do try and sort of analyse the data? But there is a huge diversity in what we're funding. So we have groups coming back to us saying, we use this survey that has shown how mental health has improved. We use this survey that shows how return on investment has been generated. But if you're attending a men's cooking group for bereaved men or a homeless drop-in centre, you're just measuring very different things. And I think that's one of the strengths of this. But then you can't find one metric that rules them all.
And I'm playing devil's advocate sometimes, but to be fair, Steve, he worked in the homeless sector before, and he had to fill out how many people they were helping to get grants on that. So that is the system that they had to work, and we don't know about that. But anyway, thanks for your patience. Councillor Evans and then Councillor Coles.
Great, thank you very much for the report and presentation. I couldn't see it in the pack, so can you just confirm what the budget is for this in the next year, 26-27?
It's the same as the 25-26 budget, so £902,000.
Okay, that's great. The reason why I was keen just to clarify that is, what I think we've seen very clearly this morning with a couple of the points that have been made, in particular the fact that 93% of eligible applications were rated good or excellent. I think we can see there's actually tremendous capacity in our communities for this sort of work. The real challenge is, how do we fund it? And so the two sort of concerns that I have about how we move forward, one of them is that in the budget pack from February at full council, the public health grant that was listed associated with this project previously was indicated as a saving towards this project rather than additional spend on the project. I just wondered if, first of all, that could be clarified, whether or not that public health grant is being applied to this work on the community capacity grants, or whether or not that is enabling funding and money that had historically been allocated to the grant. And secondly, I just wondered what reassurance maybe Councillor Fletcher in particular could give us about the future of this funding, at least for the remaining life of the County Council.
So on the public health grant funding, so that is a contribution to the overall budget. It's £250,000, and that contribution remains for the 26-27 budget as well. So it forms part of the overall pot, and you're probably aware that the public health grant itself has conditions that our public health team have to report to the Department of Health and Social Care on nationally. So in terms of monitoring impact, etc., they have very strict criteria that they have to report on the how that funding is used. So that funding remains for both the previous year and this year as part of an overall contribution.
And just to put it bluntly, I can't make any guarantees, because as we all know, the demand for everything that we do is going up and funding is going down. So I love this program. I think it's absolutely brilliant, but no, I can't guarantee anything at this point.
Good try, Councillor Evans. Councillor Coles.
Thank you. Good morning, all. It's great to have you with us, and I always love hearing about the fantastic work that you guys are all doing in our communities. So thank you very much for that. I'm from Witney, and we're really lucky because we've got a number of different organisations, particularly focused on tackling isolation and loneliness. And in fact, there's somewhere that people can go every single day of the week in Witney, and it's just superb. My question, I think Zoe's touched on it a little bit, is what measures are in place to ensure that some of those smaller organisations do get a fair crack at the whip when applying for funding? I'm thinking those with 1 or 2 volunteers or staff members, and perhaps not the bigger, more professional organisations or charities with the dedicated fundraisers, because as you guys know, they deliver just as important work in our communities. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's absolutely our focus. And unsurprisingly, lots of the larger charities often say to us, why do you limit who can apply? Because we're doing great work. But I think our feeling is the smaller ones represent a huge amount of what's being done, and they won't access contracts, and they won't access National Lottery Fund and so on. So that's why we collectively go around the county having sit down face-to-face conversations with them that sort of spiral, I think, everything from do I need to have 3 trustees to be eligible to what does it look like to have a constitution and so on. So that's the sort of day-to-day stuff that's happening. And then specifically for this, we'll offer everything from for somebody who wasn't comfortable filling an application form, our grants officer interviews them and then fills it in for them. We have a widget where it can be translated into languages. We do one-to-one conversations with people to talk it through with them. And anyone can take that up, but it's generally the smallest groups that most need that. So it's trying to make it a fair playing field. And also, maybe I should highlight, so every application we get, we give to our trained bank of community assessors. They've been through modern grant making training, which teaches you to think about all kinds of bias. And the one that I am most interested in, what for me was a big learning, was people read something and if it's got poor grammar, think that the person who wrote it isn't very smart or isn't doing a good job. And it's really important, this is where we remind people, someone might be doing the best ever thing in their community. They're just not a pro at filling in forms. That's not what makes them amazing. So we have grant makers who know how to sort of read between the lines. We have a step in the assessment where the assessor, can say, they didn't really clarify this bit. And rather than just writing off that application, we go back to the group and say, you weren't clear. So for example, there was a food bank in Carterton where we said, please give us your budget. And they just gave one number. And really what we want to see is just a bit more like we spend this on food, this on energy, this on our insurance. So we'll go back to them and say, have you got that? So we try and have as many steps along the process to make sure that it's not just, oh, well, you didn't do a best in class application, you're out. And then I know with you guys, you actually have the hand holding throughout the whole year.
Just hand holding from the moment that somebody kind of gets in touch. And, we have had people that have got in touch that haven't constituted yet, or they haven't got an independent bank account, and so actually part of our support can be working through that whole process with them before we can get to a point that we think that they're in a suitable position to be able to accept some funding. But we've seen, I think because it has been a few years now, we've seen some really lovely stories of progress, and it's just great to see some of those organisations that did start off as one volunteer in a community identifying a gap a day in the week where there wasn't anything available for anybody, talking to us about the idea, starting something, and then growing that. And I think that to me is the essence of the Oxfordshire way, and creating that web and that network of community support so that people can live their lives how they want in their communities.
Sorry, can I just add, and just with the beauty about the Connected Community Funds in particular is that we have purposely made it as accessible as possible based on a lot of learning from past grants, and to make it distinct, because it is a small amount of money, it needs to be proportional, and that capacity building is so important. So even for those volunteer groups who haven't necessarily constituted, they may have an idea that doesn't quite fit, but they need that time to talk it through. And that's why we need the staff, we need people with expertise to really talk it through and see what else is happening within that community as well. And that is a beauty. And what I would like to just give a quick nod to the county council, because they have been very flexible and allowed us to adapt. So as soon as we have feedback from those groups, say that this bit didn't quite work for us, we have adapted, and that's been great because its flexibility is so important when you're working with grassroots groups.
And just to close that loop, although we have to say no to the vast majority of applicants, we offer feedback to every single one. So, and that's something that everyone keeps telling us no other funder does that. And of course, the county council couldn't possibly have time to do that, but they can ring up or come in person and we'll sit down and we'll talk them through how the assessors looked at their application, because in the end, what we want is to build them up to be successful getting funds, if not from us, then elsewhere.
And I think just to finish off, I think the expertise and knowledge and care, frankly, that our voluntary sector partners show to those grassroots organisations underpins exactly why it was the right decision strategically for our voluntary sector partners to administer these grants.
Further questions, members? No? Well, unless anybody came up, I couldn't think of any recommendations to put forward. Anyone else got any recommendations they could think of to Councillor Hallaby?
Yeah, I would think we could get a bit more feedback. I know you say it's, I've heard you saying it can be a bit difficult, but I think that concerning the amount of money that is now kept flowing in and out of your programmes, I would really quite like to have perhaps another update or come back or maybe have someone from one of the programmes to come and talk to us if they felt they could.
I'll just come in Victoria first and then you Laura.
Just thinking about what colleagues said earlier, would it be helpful for the committee if we actually forwarded the reports that have got because I think Laura talks quite extensively about the qualitative and quantitative data that we do collect. So if perhaps in the first instance you have those reports and then we can then think about any forward planning.
Yeah, and I'll be happy with that.
Can I just quickly add as well that actually throughout the life of these funds, particularly some of the groups that have been through that process have been and presented at some other forums that I think councillors would be welcome to go to, like the Prevention and Health Inequalities Forum. So actually it just might be worth kind of in circulating those reports, add in some spaces and opportunities to come and hear from groups as well, you know, because there are other bits of the county where some of that stuff is being reported back and groups themselves are coming in and talking about their experiences.
Yeah, I'd be very happy with that. I know Toya and I went to the Oxford Print and it really helped us when they came and speak, we could really understand better in that sense to see it. And I know when we did the community grants in South Oxfordshire, you know, I was, you know, it's our grant, so I'm willing to sell what they do with the money if anyone asks me. And it's just in this situation, if members of the public say, what did you do with 900,000? It's like, well, now we've got reports we can point them to. It was just when we were reading it, I found it hard to work out exactly how many people we're preventing from going into extra care and so forth. So I appreciate that if you could forward that. And any other recommendations? No. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you're all very busy, and Laura, Emily, and Zoe, I do apologise when I read out your name. It is. I didn't have a stutter. It was written down.
My name's a nightmare for everyone. I never expect it to be
and
spelled
also
right.
Springs. and thank you, Izzy, as always very knowledgeable. So we're going to take a comfort break because we've got some speakers in the next item. So we're just going to give them a few minutes to get ready. All right. Thank you. All right, thank you very much. We're going to resume the meeting now with item 6 on the agenda, which is an update on the council's shared live service. And today the committee welcomes, retains Councillor Fletcher, Cabinet Member for Adult Services. We've also got Sam Harper, Head of Service, and Victoria stayed with us. We've also got guests Sally Ellis from the Shared Lives Team Manager, Nikki Oleksu, is that right? Shared Lives Social Worker, Jane Whitaker, Shared Lives Carer, and Sarah Hopwood, Shared Lives Scheme Expert by Experience. Okay, so who wants to, Councillor Fletcher, if you start the presentation.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is another one that I am absolutely delighted to introduce, our Share Lives service. It's a brilliant example of what the Oxfordshire way actually looks like in practice. So I'm really grateful to Sally and Nikki, and particularly to Jane and Sarah for giving up their time to be with us today. Shared Lives is about people with additional needs living as part of an actual household. So it gives them the opportunity to build relationships, be part of a community, and get actually very personalised care and support. We currently have 86 Shared Lives households supporting 114 people across the county. The quality is amazing, CQC rated good and outstanding for caring, and they have described it as extraordinary. We are really grateful to our carers who quite literally open up their homes to support some of our most vulnerable adults. But we do need more of them. So one of the things that I would actually like to ask the committee for support in today is to help us continue to raise awareness of the value of becoming a shared lives carer, because we want the service to be strong and sustainable. So please, I would really appreciate your support with that. And I will now hand over to Victoria.
Thank you very much, everyone. And just like Councillor Fletcher, bringing Shared Lives here is an absolute pleasure today. Certainly, as a service, we are incredibly proud of the work that Sally and the team and our carers, and particularly the people we support, have in developing and maintaining the service. I think one of the absolute standout factors for me is that the people we support and our carers are absolutely integral to the development and ongoing training and support that we are able to provide through this service, and proud to have obviously been, recognised nationally on TV as a result of the fabulous work that takes place. I'm not going to talk for very long at all because I'm going to hand over to the people that are absolutely integral to this. So, Sam.
Good morning, everyone. So, my name's Sam Harper, Head of Service, responsible for the Shared Lives service. As Councillor Fletcher said within her introduction, Shared Lives is a community-based social care service that supports adults who need extra help to live it independently by matching them with an approved Shared Lives carer. Shared Lives very much is built around family life, relationships and belonging. Across the UK, there are around 150 Shared Lives services that support over 10,000 people. The majority of those are run internally by local authorities, but on occasion they also can be, Shared Lives schemes can be outsourced to external providers as well. Again, as Councillor Fletcher said, we've got 86 approved Shared Lives households in Oxfordshire that support 114 individuals, either in long-term or short-term short breaks arrangements. In terms of the breakdown in terms of people's needs, we have 83% of people that have a learning disability that are in long-term arrangements, and then 17% that have a range of other needs, and that very much mirrors the national picture as well in terms of those sort of demographics. So in terms of Shared Lives in Oxfordshire, it was established in the 1990s. Shared Lives operates in a similar way to how foster care does, with Shared Lives carers offering support to adults operating within the legislative framework that governs us in adult social care, namely the Care Act. In terms of the process, there's a rigorous process in place to ensure that our Shared Lives carers are suitable for the role. In terms of what this looks like, there's an in-depth assessment that will take place with a member of the Shared Lives team. Several references are asked for and checked, such as enhanced DBS checks. Once all that is completed, there is then a panel which I chair, and it has a number of experts by experience on the panel as well that will look at that assessment and make sure that we're happy to approve people as shared lives carers. Following that, there's an induction process. So a number of training is put on for people, and then shared lives carers are carefully matched with people who wish to use the service. And then there'll be an introduction process before deciding whether it's a good match for the person and the shared lives carer. As kind of stated earlier, the Oxfordshire scheme is registered with the Care Quality Commission, as all shared lives schemes are, and currently rated good with outstanding in the care component. I won't skip past that bit. So in terms of ensuring equitable access, we're really strongly committed to developing the shared lives scheme and the ongoing development of it. As Councillor Fletcher alluded to, it very much aligns with our principles within the Oxfordshire way in terms of maximising people's independent living skills and supporting them to live their best life. If it's identified that a person has a need for supported accommodation, usually our first port of call is to look at shared lives first. I think we really see the benefits of living in a family setting rather than more kind of restrictive care in terms of residential care. One of the areas that we're really proud of, and it's been a strategic ambition of ours, is to see a higher proportion of young people access the scheme. You know, we strongly feel that shared lives gives younger people a stable and consistent environment, again, to maximise their independence and help them achieve their goals and aspirations. And as we've said, so the scheme currently supports 39% of people, 39% of the people in the scheme are care leavers, which equates to 40% of the total people we have in long-term arrangements. In terms of ensuring sufficiency, as with any support provider and very similar to foster care, recruitment and retention is a really essential component of maintaining a strong and sustainable shared lives scheme. Shared lives tends to attract carers who are an older demographic, so I think we're really proud that we get very few people that leave the scheme because they feel that they can't do it anymore. It's mainly when people leave the scheme, it's because they've reached an age where they'd like to retire. So, you know, in making sure that we keep getting new carers coming in is really, really important. In recent years, we've had an increased focus on marketing. So that's included television adverts, lots of activity on social media, so Facebook and other areas. The team's also very good at getting to various community events to promote the scheme. But what we find, and this kind of mirrors the national picture, is that the best way of recruiting shared lives carers is through word of mouth. So we've had some really fantastic examples of so where foster carers have adult children, they've then gone on to become shared lives carers themselves, and we've seen that's been really fantastic. Again, you know, it's an area we have managed to grow. So in 2025, we had 11 new approved households, and this is an increase compared to the previous 5 years, where it was an average of 5 households a year. In terms of broadening our shared lives offer, like I said, you know, we are involved in national conversations about looking at whether there's any kind of additional flexibility in the scheme, and that includes looking at whether we could support people with acute mental health needs and also those that are homeless. Those conversations are quite embryonic at the moment, but like I said, one area where we've had really specific success is around our care, getting more care leavers into the system, and Nikki has played a really fundamental role in that. And as you can see, so in 24-25 we had 9 new care leavers that joined the scheme, and then in 25-26 we've had additional 13. We're working with foster carers currently supporting young people with disabilities who said they would like to continue supporting that person to move into adulthood, so it's allowed real continuity as well, so that's been really important. And we've got really established links between the shared lives service, our moving into adulthood team in adult social care, and our disabled children's teams in children's social care. So there's a really kind of good and established pathway there, which we're kind of very proud of. And again, yeah, so just I guess to finish, just to say it's an area of adult social care that we are very, very proud of. Our shared lives team is a really strong, caring and skilled team led fantastically by Sally over the last 16 years, I think it is, as manager. So I think it's an area we're absolutely committed to continuing to grow as best we can. And I'm going to try and just play a very quick video, and you might recognise the people in this.
I asked around and found out about shared lives, and it was perfect because it's not because you're looking after adults.
Our vision within adult social care is the Oxfordshire way, which is to support people to live well and able within their communities. And shared lives is a really, really good example of where, as a county council, we do this.
Somebody who's willing to share their home with another person. It's about being nurturing, helping somebody gain independent skills, being that family link for them.
It's lovely. I like it. I like knowing about trains and, well, I don't know about computer games. I can't cope with that. But trains and buses and all of the things they're interested in, it adds a lot to my life. It's wonderful, actually. And if you aren't there, the whole team is there. I never feel I'm on my own looking after the boys. When something goes well, for instance, Kai started going to college and he hadn't really been in education, and he's managed, hasn't he, to go for 3 days a week. What an achievement. You know, it's lovely to see that happening.
These people have done a transformative thing, and I think the whole of society benefits from that effort and that incredible selfless endeavour.
And she's so kind to them, and they both, you can tell, absolutely love her.
I mean, Lewis did say to me one day, he said, "So I suppose you're like a mum thing, are you?" And I thought, yes, he's happy.
And the results, the outcomes for these people is just astonishing.
Because being part of a family, being part of a community really does support people to excel and does support what they're good at.
Shared lives does, I have to say, go up to any age. So I think we've got somewhere around 90 shared lives carers across Oxfordshire.
It has to be made more widely known. I think everybody knows about foster care, but unfortunately not so many people know about shared lives, and certainly not shared lives for young adults. Go for it because you will love it. That's that, and I actually say that to a lot of people.
To current shared life carers, I'd like to say a huge thank you from us at Oxfordshire County Council for all you do day in, day out to really make fulfilling lives for the people that you support.
Thank you very much. You're going to brush up on your TV skills. And Rebecca, Councillor Heritage, and then I'll come to you.
Thank you very much. And this is just, it's phenomenal. I'm just, I would like to be able to do more to encourage more involvement in this. And I think as councillors we should be. And I would really like to request, this is separate really from a scrutiny and overview question, but I would really like to request a targeted comms release or email info or something that we as councillors can use to spread the word on this. I mean, I only really learned about it leading up to this meeting, I have to be honest, and I would really like to encourage it and do more to be involved in some way. And I am interested to know if there are any geographical areas that are most in need of coverage. I mean, I'm sure you need coverage all over Oxfordshire. I'm not doubting that, but I just wondered how it works in terms of the geographical coverage and you know, if there are any particularly sort of, you know, gaping holes, if you like, that we can. I just think we should be supporting you as much as we can as councillors, as you know, division representatives. And also, I would love to hear from a user of the service as to how much they enjoy it, or what difference it's made. Nothing complicated, just you know, just how it works for them, if possible.
Should we do that bit first? Sarah, would you mind telling Councillor Heritage kind of your experience of shared lives?
Yes, that's no problem. I've actually been in shared lives for over 10 years now. My first one was 10 years, and this one I'm in now, I've been with them for over 2 years, and it's been incredibly amazing.
That's perfect.
So you can tell us a bit more about the household if you want, about your carers.
Yeah, I live with 2 lovely carers, fascinating. And last year they won an award.
They did, a
long service award, and they came first.
Didn't they? Did they help you to job? Yeah, anyway.
No, but they did support me.
Sorry if I might just chip in. So Sarah has a very active life, don't you?
Yeah.
You're on your way to work after this meeting, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to tell us anything about that?
I go to it's called Let's Play, and it's after school and holiday club for children with additional needs. So yeah, that's my paid job. So, and I also volunteer as well at Salvation Army in Banbury.
Yeah.
Right.
Just responding to your other points, Councillor Heritage, absolutely, we would welcome kind of further input. So I think, you know, but I'm happy to reach out separately and also obviously get our media colleagues involved to look at what that would look like. In terms of the geographical coverage, I'll let Sally jump in in a little bit more detail, but I think south we're probably slightly lower on care and numbers. Is that right? She's going to tell me I'm wrong now. But when I discussed mail, so we did some targeted mail drops in areas where we had less shared lives carers. Unfortunately, again, it didn't yield a huge amount of results. And again, it's still that word of mouth piece that is the most important, or the best way it seems to be of recruiting people. But I don't know, Sally, if you want to come in terms of geographical makeup.
Yeah, sure. No, I would agree. We could really do with some more. We could do with more shared lives carers anywhere. Obviously, we're a county-wide service, so we have people in Henley, and we have people in Banbury, and you know, dotted all around. But in terms of where people who might want to use the service want to be, Oxford and the main towns like Didcot and Banbury, Whitney really needs some more people in Whitney. Banbury, we really need some more people. But yes, like you say, largely it's people come to us through word of mouth, despite all our other endeavours, because it's really it's a lifestyle decision rather than an employment decision. So I think that makes all the difference if you know someone already who does this.
It's kind of vocational, isn't it? Really. So
exactly.
But thank you for that, and I really think that we should be as actively involved as possible. So we'll look forward to working with you on that if we can. Thank you.
We did see you on television, but Nikki Jane, did you want to say anything at this point or anything? About your experiences?
Well, I was a foster carer for 22 years, and then I'd had a young lad living with me for 7 years, and he was coming up to 18, and I didn't know about shared lives. Nobody really knew about shared lives, but I was very worried about what was going to happen to him. And it was just chance. A friend said, "Have you heard of shared lives?" And then I actually pestered Sally, who I didn't know who she was, but I got her number, and I pestered her, and I said, "I want to become a shared lives carer." And so I did the training, and my lad was able to move from foster care just stayed in Shared Lives. And for him, he's high functioning autism and has got ADHD, but he was very, very anxious about where he was going to go when he was 18. And for him to stay, it's because he was already part of the family. And so he just stayed in the family, and he's doing incredibly well. He, despite everything, he's got a job because he didn't want to work, but he's got a job. He cleans buses in Witney at night because his passion is buses. And so he's out working. He's also passed his driving test. He can really only drive from Oxford to Witney, but that's wonderful. And he travels the country on buses. And he's really come on in the 2 years. And I've also got another young lad who came to me from the care system, but he'd moved around a lot. And he's been with me for about 18 months,
Maybe 2 years now.
Nearly 2
He
years
was
now.
from a children's home.
Yes, and it's taken him most of that time to be able to relax and settle and feel safe. He's actually managed to go to college for all of last year, which was huge because he'd been out of college or education. And I just think that we really need to get these young people coming from care to move into Shared Lives because they need an all-round support. And the support I've had, it's absolutely amazing. I've done so many courses. There are so many Shared Lives social workers. If you ring up, they know who you are. They know what child you look after, even if I can't get hold of Nikki, but I do get hold of Nikki all the time, even when I shouldn't. But it's just a really lovely thing to do, and I wish more people would do it.
Thank you. We'll get some more questions, I'm sure. Councillor Hannaby.
Well, it's very difficult to find anything that's negative about Shared Lives, isn't it, really? So I think I'll just ask the questions about the external providers other than in homes, and when is I should know this question because I had it myself, but when do you now start looking at the children that are in our care? What age group do you look at children to move them on and to try and pair them with the right people and circumstances, etc. Yeah, well, those are two to start with. Is that all right?
So again, Nikki's played an absolutely fundamental role in this. We've actually started from the age of 14. We've started kind of mapping in terms of at what age we'd start having more proper conversations around that, because we also need to assess these young people under the Care Act to make sure that they'd be eligible. It's usually around the age of 16. And the other bit I didn't put in the presentation, but I should mention, we are able to take people from the age of 16, and we've actually but we've not managed to do it before, but we've literally just got someone who's going to move in at the age of 17 again, that's given that continuity. And I think what we find is that there's a number of children that unfortunately sometimes end up in residential care because there isn't the availability of foster care at the time. And actually would really thrive in a family setting, which Shared Lives offers. So I think, like I said, so there is that really good pathway in place at the moment where we've managed to either do foster carer to Shared Lives conversions well ahead of time, or we found some young people that are in residential care that've got additional needs that are eligible under the Care Act, and we've been able to match them ahead of time so that there's a really seamless process in advance of their 18th birthday.
Sorry, beg your pardon. Does lead to loneliness, and then of course also feeling ill or getting something like this. So it's so valuable if you could put a younger person even that brings a bit more vitality. Do you try to do that, or do you have older people that, that would like to have a younger person around them?
So I think we tend to find that it's people probably in their 50s onwards that are normally slightly more interested in being shared lives carers, usually because they're at a particular point in their life. I mean, as much as anything, obviously people need a spare room to be able to become a foster carer. So you sometimes find that, you know, people that have adult children have left home, so they've now got a spare room. They might have just retired from a job and actually, like you said, looking for that kind of, still want a sense of fulfillment and have a role to play. So yeah, no, I wouldn't say we specifically target anyone in particular around that, but certainly it does seem to attract people that are, you know, have that coming to a new chapter in their life anyway, through, like I said, retirement at work or family situation has changed. So I think naturally that happens when we're recruiting.
I have to ask about finances because we do. Is there a financial benefit for the county to have people shared lives? Because obviously, if they have to go into provider, into a home or something, be looked after, is there a benefit as well for that? Our numbers go down, do they?
So yes, it is more financially viable to have a shared lives setting because, like I said, the people aren't subjected to such restrictive levels of care. So yes, it is more financially.
I'll just come back on that as well, though, just to elaborate a little bit further on that. As Sam said, so we're not working with people that have overheads of large buildings and so on and so forth. But I think as well as it being a really cost efficient methodology, the key though around this is actually about the normalcy that it brings to life. And I think listening to Jane talking, it's so inspirational in terms of the things that people can achieve as a consequence of being in that just very gloriously ordinary setting that enables people to move forward. So whilst it is cost efficient, the true driver of this and the value is actually in what people can achieve in working in this way.
It's a win-win situation, really, isn't it? Which is what we need. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, let's Councillor Coles first this time, and then
Thank you. I can't speak highly enough of this scheme, and thank you so much, Sarah, for coming today and for sharing your experiences. I've known about the scheme for about 25 years from my own work in the field, and I know Roger and Kim and another young man that they support. In fact, he's still in touch with me, and I genuinely know what a difference it's made to him, and you know, it's just absolutely incredible. So question for you guys is, I suppose, what in your experience is the main obstacle for recruiting more share life carers? What are the main problems that you come across in why people don't carry it forward?
Sally, do you want to take that?
I think there's a number. One of them is just general awareness. So I think I often say to people, if you ask people generally, have you considered being a foster carer? They would know what that was, and at some level they might have ruled that in or ruled that out themselves. But if you say, have you considered being a shared lives carer? The first question is going to be, what is that? Even so, although we do a lot, we've done a lot to try and raise general awareness with the public. It's a little bit of an uphill struggle, you know. We're just, you know, we're one of many bits of information out there. So that's one. And I think the other thing is that most people that come to us come through, they already know somebody who does this. Not everybody, but the majority. And so therefore they've seen how it works. They've had time to consider it overall. When we do social media campaigns, etc., often people call up, and one of the barriers is often we get somebody calling and saying, well, I'm interested, I do everything that needs to be done, but my partner or spouse isn't going to do the training or isn't going to, you know. So that has been a barrier, because we do require, if there's people who are in a partnership, we require them both to go through the whole process, because obviously they're going to be lone working, with people who use the service. So we need to know that everybody in the household is appropriate and suitably skilled, and we've done all the safety checks. But largely, I think the majority of it is about awareness and knowing the scheme exists. So I would invite any of you, obviously Councillor Fletcher in particular, but any of you are welcome. If you would like to go and see how Shared Lives works in your constituency, in your area, we're always very happy to arrange those kind of visits, and Shared Lives carers are generally very happy to make that possible. So yeah.
Just a quick follow-up. You said earlier that Witney was a particular problem on one of the Witney councillors. Roughly how many shared life carers do you have in Witney?
At the moment, we've really only got one who's in Witney town, but it used to be quite a hot spot for us of shared lives. So, and there are people that want to live in Witney, and we can't accommodate them.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's Councillor Evans and then Councillor Badstow.
Very well, thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you all very much for being here. My two questions really. One was about, we've spoken, and I would endorse what others have said about recruitment of carers. I wonder also about the referral of people into the scheme who are going to benefit from it. In particular, you've mentioned that 40% are care leavers. Is that what you would consider to be a natural share of the people who would benefit from this service? About 2/5 would come from care leavers, or does that rather suggest that people who are in the care system are very effectively being referred into this scheme, but people who grow up outside of the care system are not so much, and that there could be a lot of demand for this that exists outside of people who have come through conventional care programs, where there could be a challenge in trying to get people referred in? My second question is, you mentioned in the report that there are 150 of these schemes working across the country. What forums are there for sharing best practice between those different schemes and understanding what we do well, what we do less well, and what potentially easy wins that may not have occurred to us we may be able to gain from elsewhere?
So in terms of your first question, so I would say that in terms of the children in care, I think what we're seeing is that there's an increasing trend of young people in the care system that do have additional needs, do have disabilities for whatever reason. So I think we are seeing an increased amount of people in the care system that would be suitable for a shared lives arrangement, where I would say, I mean, I've worked in social care in children and adults for 15 years. I think there is a trend and a shift towards more children with disabilities in the care system than there perhaps was 10 years ago. In terms of it being, I guess, disproportionate, that isn't something I'm worried about as such. I think we've got our moving into adulthood team that I think would absolutely identify if a young person might be suitable for a shared lives arrangement. We have various practice forums, and as I said in the presentation, so actually if we're at a stage where a young person does need supported accommodation, regardless of their status about whether they're in the care system or not, we would absolutely look at shared lives as our first opportunity. I think, as Victoria alluded to, I think some of the outcomes we've had from people being in shared lives arrangements have been really, really fantastic, where I've had people that may stay in a shared lives arrangement for 5, 6, 7 years, but then actually, because of the fantastic support that the shared lives care has provided, they're then ready to live in their own tenancy, either with a little bit of outreach support or fully independently. So I think it's always an area that we would look to go to first. It's not an option for everyone. Some people's needs are too complex for the scheme, but it's certainly, like I said, our first port of call. In terms of the best practice element, we're very much linked in with Shared Lives Plus, the big kind of national charity, and I know Sally's very much involved regionally and nationally in those conversations. So we've linked in with various projects that they've run. So they've run a care leavers project over the last few years that we've had some input into. So I think we're well linked into kind of the regional and national forums around best practice. And like I said, we're having those national conversations around actually, is there more flexibility in these schemes? Could we look at supporting people with dementia? Could we look at supporting the homeless population or people with acute mental health needs? And similarly with recruitment, I think we're all trying to share best practice around recruitment. Like I said, still nationally, very much the picture is it's word of mouth. But yeah, we are linked in nationally, absolutely.
Councillor Batstow.
Yes, I'm a substitute on this committee. So I first discovered about Share Lives about 9 o'clock yesterday evening. But I'm really impressed with it. And but I think I'm reiterating what other speakers have said. It's interesting that I don't know about it and people do not know about it. And it's still, we only seem to hear about Shared Lives through word of mouth. And I think we all need to think of ways of making this scheme far more visible to the general public. I think you're doing a fantastic job. And mentioning the areas where you've got carers, we're very interested in Wantage and Grove area and the southern part of the county. And are there any carers in that area?
I know Sally will certainly be able to answer the Wantage and Grove question, but I'm just really reflecting on what you say there about the visibility and sort of the ask there. It's really interesting because we did a campaign with Sky, and I think Sally's point about how do you get over in a bite-sized piece actually what the real tremendous impact of this is. And I think that probably aligns to what Sally was saying in terms of the social media campaigns, for instance. We can get a little bit, we can get a few words out. I mean, when you think about the national profile, we've been on the One Show. I think the snippets you had from there were with interviews with people, but it is really hard to keep up that momentum or to for people to really understand what that could mean in your own household. And so I think that word of mouth, as I've just been thinking as we've been talking, as Councillor Heritage says, we need to think about how does that messaging become a conversation rather than a bite-sized piece of information. So I think that's something for us to take away, but also hopefully with your support to be able to think how we kind of enhance conversations around this subject rather than, as I say, try to do it through an advertising type approach, because what we're seeing is that, and again nationally, it just doesn't work because I just don't think you can get the richness of it into a bite-sized piece. Sally, I'll let you, I saw you flick on immediately for the Wantage and Grove.
I was just mentally counting in my head as well. How many people we've got in Wantage? Actually, we're reasonably well served in Wantage and Grove. I think we've got 6 households, which, as in terms of the county-wide picture, is quite good. And they don't all know each other, but there is some of it is because some of them know each other. So we're fairly well served. We could always do with more. It's a very popular area.
Yeah. Just my chip in a bit now. I understand the pressures of getting people to volunteer for this. I'm a trustee at Dickock Volunteer Drivers, and we put posters up and we took social media everywhere, and we don't get anybody come up, and then you speak to somebody and they go, "Oh, I'd do something like that," and you think, well, why have you know? But I don't know. I don't know what algorithms you're using because this hasn't come up on my social media feeds, and I'm getting to that age where that demographic, maybe not yet, but soon I'll be getting to it. And on a point earlier, I mean, I think if it is possible to arrange, to visit an area, if we've got one in Didcot, Becca and I could perhaps go together and visit. I'd be very grateful for that. The only other one I've got is it just for care? Because I'm just thinking, I've spent 30 years in Cowley Road, and a few years ago, a very young lad was on the streets and that, and finally when he got into a house, he didn't want to be on his own in a room, and he was back on the streets because loneliness of sitting in there, and so this would be a perfect, but he was only about 18, but this would be a perfect thing if he actually had someone to live with. It could have kept him off the streets permanently. Do we just work through the care system, or can you expand? Do we work with homeless, mental health and so forth?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's not just for people who have been in the care system. It's in terms of eligibility. So people would need a supported accommodation need, under the Care Act. So the Care Act eligibility bit is the main thing, but it's not for one particular client group at all. It's just dependent on that level of eligibility once they've been assessed under the Care Act.
Much. Any other comments from councillors? No. Yeah.
The only thing that's sprung up to me was about promotion, but you're pushing against an open door.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Just desperately trying to find a recommendation. That was all. So, does anybody else have anything?
Well, I think congratulations to the service. And it was delightful to hear from you, Sarah, and the successes that this is bringing to many people. So maybe we could have a update again on our programme, let a bit more to see how we can promote. Well, I suppose it's how can we promote? I think that's what we're saying from the scrutiny. How can we promote more?
Yeah, I think that if anything, that's the recommendation for us, that we as you said, we need to be able to reach out into communities and promote this excellent scheme. And I think if there's any recommendation arising from today, that's probably it.
I'm just trying, because they are doing everything they can. That's the thing. So, how can we recommend to carry on doing what you're doing? Though, but do you want to say something?
So, if I take away as an action, then for us to think about what does a briefing note for you look like in terms of the conversations that you could have as councillors with people in your constituencies, that would be wonderful. And then we will think again. I've just written down. Just think a little bit about the social media presence. Just noting what you've said, Chair, that it's not coming through on your media presence, so we can think about that through our LinkedIn and so on and so forth.
For Fletcher as well. I'm just too young. We can do that. Add that sort of tracker, then that we can come back with a note just on how the progress is going on. Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for coming and all the work that you do and giving us your experience, because as you can see, we weren't overly, or some of us weren't overly knowledgeable about the shared lives. So really do appreciate your time today. All right. Thank you very much. Yes, of course. Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Coles. Yes, of course. Yeah, we'll give it a couple of minutes. Right, thank you very much. We're going to resume the scrutiny overview meeting today. We're moving on to now item 7 on the agenda, which is the consultation of the proposed changes to adult social care contributions policy. Councillor Fletcher, would you like to begin the presentation?
Like is a strong word. Okay, so this one, unlike the last two, this is one that I actually really wish I didn't have to introduce, to be completely honest. This report is about the consultation on our proposed changes to our adult social care contributions policy. Adult social care is one of, if not the biggest thing that we do as a council. We support over 6,800 people. It costs us around £330 million a year. And as I alluded to Councillor Evans earlier, demand is constantly rising and our funding is being taken away. So we are now in a position of real financial pressure. So we have to think about how we can update how we financially assess for our services while maintaining our duties under the Care Act 2014. The consultation is looking at a few specific areas, so changes to disability related expenditure, introducing a £10 charge for some of our transport arrangements and moving to a single weekly charge for telecare. The proposals are subject to consultation so that we can hear from people who use the services and make sure that we get this right within the financial constraints that have been put upon us. And your views and questions today can really help us shape the final recommendations. So that's what I would really ask for. Thanks.
Victoria?
So thank you very much, and likewise, certainly following our last two items, this is certainly a much more serious and pressing item in terms of financial constraints and pressures. I think I would just reiterate, we do have a number of slides, sorry, to go through that will take us through the paper, just to break some of it down. I know that people particularly find the disability related expenditure area both complex to understand and also what the impacts will be. So we will try to break some of that down as we have in the paper today. I think that it is it is a tricky position. It is very much a consultation. So far, we've had around about 200 hard copy responses to date in terms of that consultation. We've done 2 online engagement sessions, and we are getting the questions coming in through the inbox for this consultation as well. So there's certainly very good. We know that there will be a lot of feeling and a lot of points that we will need to consider as a consequence of what comes in. This is in the context of there not being easy decisions to make in the funding picture outlined by Councillor Fletcher. And I think that, as I say, we have to bear that in mind going forward. The principles of this consultation is to, for us, we've tried very hard to think about how do we create equity and sustainability in terms of our services. Adult social care is a means-tested service. It's not free at the point of delivery, and therefore we have to give the consideration to how do we conduct that means testing within the constraints that we have, the guidance that we have that's set down in statutory guidance. And sorry, I lost my train there. But yeah, how do we do that means testing in terms of the statutory guidance that we have? How do we ensure that we're being fair and not putting too much onerous burden on individuals with support needs to be sending in receipts? And that's why we still are maintaining that we will hold the blanket 25% allowance if the consultation is agreed, if the outcome is that it is agreed. And how do we make sure, as I say, that is going to ensure sustainability of our services for the future? The reality of it is that, as the paper outlines, we are facing a funding deficit at the moment. We can see in real time that government grant funding is in real terms is coming down, and in totality we have a circa 35 million deficit that we do need to address and look at right across the piece. How are we going to support services? I'm going to hand over to Lavelle to take us through the slides. Are you ready, Lavelle?
Thank you, Victoria. So my name is Liveo Chingalembe. I'm the head of adult social care finance, and I'm here to talk about the proposed changes to our disability-related expenditure that we are currently consulting on. So I've got just a few slides to go through, if that's okay. So adult social care is means tested, and councils may charge for care and support in line with the Care Act. So this consultation is in line with that Care Act. Currently, we support around 6,800 people with diverse needs and spend around £330 million each year, as Victoria has highlighted there. So with the aging population and increasing complexity of needs, the financial pressures are significant and requires a review of our charges to ensure that we continue to deliver sustainable services. As already highlighted, I think we are facing significant financial pressures of around 35 million funding gap, and demand is rising. So reviewing the contributions policy is one of a part of a wider program to maintain financial stability, sustainability, while protecting essential services. This is not simply a savings exercise, it is a policy review to ensure charging arrangements remain fair, lawful, proportionate, and sustainable. The timescales of national adult social care reform is not known, so we need to plan how we deliver sustainable adult social care in Oxfordshire. If approved, the proposed changes would save around £500,000 in year savings, that's this year, and about 1.2 million in future years. Making these savings will help the council to continue to provide important services during a difficult financial time. The charging policy proposals were included in the adult social care budget agreed by the council in February 2026. This offers fair and sustainable contributions. So changes aim for consistent and equitable charges that reflect individual needs and funding constraints, ensuring fairness and financial stewardship. The consultation process began on the 11th of May and is due to end on the 21st of June. Our focus areas remains changes to reducing the disability-related allowance, changes to transport policy, and telecare charging. Equality impact assessments will ensure protection for people who may be negatively affected by these proposed changes if approved. So the changes being proposed are to reduce the disability-related contributions. Currently, it's at 35%. That's the initial allowance that you allow. So we are proposing to reduce it to 25%, which will reduce up with about 10%. This aligns with the standard disability-related practice across the country, where we have done a benchmarking exercise. So Oxfordshire current rate is higher than many other local councils and higher than typical disability-related expenditure identified through the benchmarking and practice review. The proposal keeps a standard allowance in place, but rebalances it to a level considered more proportionate while preserving a route for individual circumstances to be recognized. I think this is really important, that individuals who have disability expenditure, which is higher than 25%, they will still be able to submit requests for individual assessments. The second proposal that we are proposing is around transport charging. We are proposing to introduce a flat £10 per day charge for transport arranged by adult social care. This would only apply where transport is arranged by the council. It would not apply to all transport generally. Where possible, people are expected to use public transport, walk, community transport, or mobility options. We recognize that some people are not able to use that. Therefore, those people will be individually assessed. Young people receiving transport to attend college or school will be exempt from those charges. Well, where the charge creates financial difficulties, it can be considered through the disability-related expenditure and individual assessments again. The third proposal is looking at telecare charges. So what we are proposing here is to charge for telecare service for everyone using the service at a rate of £9.87 per week. Telecare is not a service councils are legally required to provide, although it is an important preventative offer. A free 6-week trial period would remain for people receiving telecare as part of hospital discharge and reablement package. This will ensure that they've got the right support while they are just back in their home environment. We also acknowledge that technology is fast moving and many people are able to look at alternatives that are available. For people already receiving other adult social care services, the telecare cost can be considered within the disability-related expenditure, and individual assessments arrangements where appropriate will be made as well. So the context why this change is being proposed, I think it's to ensure the contributions remain aligned with legislation, current practice and affordability, to bring Oxfordshire more in line with the approaches taken by other local authorities, to support the council's wider financial sustainability while continuing to protect core statutory services, and to maintain a charging framework that is simple, transparent, and administratively proportionate. I think the need to reduce the cumbersome process of people having to submit receipts for their expenditure, I think remains our priority. This is much more less intrusive where we ask people to submit receipts. So by maintaining it at 25%, people can still meet their disability-related expenditure. So the consultation and engagement approach, so the consultation opened on the 11th of May 2026 and runs for 6 weeks until 21st of June. Engagement would include online survey, paper survey, online information sessions, and ongoing targeted stakeholder engagements. I think we have written to all the people who have been affected by this, and if this proposal is taken forward again, we'll be engaging with those people individually. So key stakeholders like Oxfordshire Family Support Network and local support networks will actively participate to provide informed feedback and their perspectives. So consultation closes on the 21st of June. Responses will be analysed alongside financial, legal, and
Isabel, can I just ask you to sort of summarise a bit more, because you know we could send this through if you could, because we've got a lot of questions. I'm sure people want to ask. It's reading it off.
Yeah.
Good, please.
So to summarise, the proposal to increase the disability-related expenditure to reduce to 25% aligns with our policy and to ensure that we continue to deliver equitable services in the future. The telecare charges, again, it's a non-statutory service that we are looking at to start charging people who receive telecare and consider other alternatives. In the transport service, again, we are encouraging people to use other public transport. Where that's not possible, we'll consider that as a disability-related expenditure. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. It's just a lot of it was in the report that we've read, so just need to push along. Anybody else want to say anything before we go to questions? Or no?
Just appreciating, as I say, know that this is, you know, it is a difficult subject matter, but yes, absolutely welcome questions, and certainly bringing this here today for scrutiny is very much, I think, part of, you know, what we need to do in terms of the consultation process, but also to have that open discussion about.
Thank you. Okay, who wants to go first? You know, we haven't heard from you. No, you go first. You go first, and review. Yeah.
Yeah, I know you've not heard from me all day, so This is a very difficult one. I do agree, I do admit, but there's one thing I need some clarification for before I ask you further questions. You said this is not a policy review. This is a policy review, but not a savings review when you were making your analysis. Then the next line talks about the £500,000 savings at 1.2 million, which? Is it a savings review or is it a policy review? I just want some clarification.
So thank you for that, and I think it's a fair comment just into the terminology that's been used in the paper. I think that what we really need to be saying in there is that actually it will generate, we believe, 500,000 this year and then 1.2 million in additional income. So it's sort of, it is not savings in that respect. It is about generating additional income. And then I think that in terms of the policy, it is a policy review. And when you think about where we are in terms of, so this brings together disability related expenditure, transport, and telecare under one policy. At the moment, you know, both for our staff and for the residents of Oxfordshire, we don't have a coherent policy that they can look to see what is and isn't included in terms of transport. And as a consequence of that, we have inequity across the council. So we have some people, both with practitioners and residents, who actually may be perfectly able to take a bus or find their own way to a resource, but because we currently don't have a policy around it, they say, oh well, we'll take the transport, and then of course our practitioners don't know that there is a charge associated with it. So we do need to bring clarity and equity, and I can use examples where we've had people say, oh, you know, there might have been an issue with the transport that morning. That's fine, I'll take the bus. In which case, then we do have to think, you know, carefully together. Why then would we use an adult social care resource to when somebody's quite happy and able to take the bus? And that's, I understand completely, that's not going to be the case for everybody, of course it's not. And that's where we will individually assess individuals to see what needs to be included in their social care support. So that's why it's a policy review. It's going to bring together these three key areas and have some fundamental clarity around the way that we administer that.
Come back in, yeah.
So I really need to be fair when I explain this out. So I break it down again. It is a saving review. It's all about saving. It's not about policy. Because no matter how we want to sugarcoat it, it comes down to savings, right? And I hear it. I hear all the I've taken my time to read this through, and I spoke about it, if you remember, in the hall last time. So it's an issue that is very, very important to me, because I do not understand how we need to. That's how I see it. Take from the less vulnerable, right, in a way, and give to people who I don't see it. I've not been able to walk my hand around it to say, why are we doing this on the amount of savings? So I'll leave that for now till I have other further questions. So my question will be, it's all about savings. It's not about policy. I just want us to define that.
So thank you, and I hear the frustration with that, and there is a real, as I say, adult social care is means tested, and there is a need to generate income from adult social care on that means tested basis. And what we have to ensure is that our means testing is aligned to the statutory guidance available to us, that it is proportionate to what the disability related expenditure of the majority of people is likely to be. And as an adult social care, we would absolutely, of course, love to be in a position where we can be more generous than we are statutorily required to be. But that is not the funding position of the council at this time. And so we cannot do that. What we do want to ensure, and I think it's really important to do this, is that we have safeguards in for people. We absolutely will not, we will provide individual assessment where they tell us that 25% disability related expenditure is not sufficient for them. We will offer them one-to-one assessments. We will go out to visit them, and we will help them work that through so that we get that right in terms of what that person can afford to pay. And as I say, this is a very, very difficult, because of course we would love to be in a position where we can say we can give more than we are allowed to, but that's just not where we are.
No, I'll go to Councillor Hannah, I'll come back to you in a second. Okay. Is it on exactly the same subject, or is it? Yeah, thank you.
You talked about benchmarking. You did use the word benchmarking. That could you tell me just explain a little bit which other counties you used to benchmark this, and how small or big the counties are, what's their budgets, so that we know that what we're doing actually will relate to what we might do.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. So what we did with the benchmarking, there's an organization called National Association of Financial Assessment, which covers the whole country. We submitted a request there in terms of how other local authorities assess disability-related expenditure. And what we discovered, I think we got around 52 responses, where the majority of them, they don't offer an initial allowance, so people are assessed from zero, which means most people have to submit the receipts of their actual expenditure. And about 11 of them, they offer an initial disability-related allowance, which ranges from £5 per week to £10 to £20. So when we looked at that, ours, which is currently at 35%, is significantly higher than most of those offered by those local authorities. And when we bring it to 25%, which was the initial DRA allowance, it aligns more with what other local authorities offer, which is still significantly higher. However, when someone's expenses, they are higher than the 25%, we offer individual assessments where we ask them after that threshold to submit the evidence that their costs are indeed higher than the 25%, and we take that into consideration. We also look at people who are facing significant financial difficulties when we carry out our financial assessments, and some of them, they are offered a waiver for a limited period whilst they are getting their finances in order. We also work with our social workers when they go out to assess people under the Care Act assessment. They identify the extra costs or disability-related costs that are being incurred by the people we support. So we work with all those people to make sure what they are paying is affordable under the current legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hanby, thank you for your patience.
Oh, it's not patience. This is one that I don't really want to talk about at all. I was the cabinet member that put it up to 35%. For one reason, is because people weren't managing. I spoke to a lot of families, individual needs. We are talking about the most disadvantaged people with disabilities, etc. And I think they're the people, well, I know these are the people that need supporting. I've got a lot, for instances, Chair, but we haven't got time, of how I came to the 35%. What I'm concerned about is that we've dropped it by 10%. I wondered, did you ever look at maybe 5% drop and see what that was? I mean, what was the thinking by dropping it by 10%? And then, so I'm just asking that. It's means tested. This will mean that all people that are on this benefit will have to be reassessed. Is that correct? Reassessed? Do all of the people are reassessed fairly? Or are you only going to reassess people that say they can't afford the changes? That's the first, that's just to get that out of the way.
So if this proposal is carried forward, all the people who will be affected will be returned to, and we will reassess them and ask them to submit any additional costs beyond the 25%.
And did you look at just reducing it by percentages rather than the drop of 10%?
When we did our analysis, currently we support about 3,500 people, and out of that 3,500 people, only about 180 people submit individual assessments because their costs are higher than the 35%. And when we looked at the 25% that we initially established, I think at the time around 900 people who were not getting anything were able to keep around 25%. And the cost, according to our analysis that we have done, most of the disability related expenditure is around that 25% range or below, slightly below 25%. So anyone who has disability related expenditure that is over 25% will be individually assessed, and we'll ask them to submit the evidence so that we ensure that people are left with enough resources to continue to meet their needs.
So, okay. Well, it's objective to see whether or not they think that what they're getting in the so-called new policy is going to be enough for their needs. One of the things when I looked at it in the first place was the quality of life after you paid your main costs. What then? I had a gentleman with 2 daughters, and he could cover their cost, but what he couldn't cover is the extra quality to their lives, like maybe going visiting things, and it's that cost that they could not afford. So it was very limited, or what he could do and where they could go. Now, you might say, well, that isn't for us here, and you've got to, but it was one of the main things that I managed to get the 35% for, is the added quality of life to people with the most, we are talking about the people that are really disadvantaged here, etc. So that was my question about, have you looked at the percentages, etc., to take us maybe a smaller gain each year, etc. Just, this is really quite heavy with a £10 a day transport. That's very heavy out of someone's, if they have to have it 5 days for any reason. Telecare, that's a shame really, but I mean, I suppose one could look at that. So it's the add-ons after you've taken 10% away from what they were getting prior. And then one more, Chair, and I'll then is I have been through, because I had adult social care since 2008 when I joined, and it's always been, something I'm focused on, health and the reassessment situation can be a little dire because we need officers and etc. to do it. So is there going to be a format that will make it a bit easier to get everybody assessed and not have to wait months to be assessed? So I think that's really my comment so far.
Thank you, Councillor Hannaby. And so just to clarify, I think those the 3 key points I've picked up there is the sort of the quality of life element that you've talked about in terms of the 35%. And I'll talk a little bit about that, and I will hand over to Lavelle just to talk about minimum income guarantee and so on, and then the reassessment processes. But at broad level, I would come back to, I don't think you would hear a director of adult social care in the country say that they wouldn't love to see a well-funded, sustainable adult social care service. The reality of it is that adult social care reform has not arrived. We are, as officers, working within the constraints of that means tested budget and expectation of income generation for us to be able to sustain the services. And through a lot of the things that we've heard this morning, like the community capacity grants and the work that we do in the community, we do a lot of work to try to ensure that there are things at low cost available grassroots for people to be able to attend in their communities. Our Care Act assessments will focus on what is somebody's need for social connection. How is that achieved? Does that need to be built into their support package? And if so, that will be, as I say, so somebody will have an assessed contribution, but of course it's a contribution. It doesn't cover the whole cost of their care. So none of the way that we approach our assessments is in terms of our Care Act duties is going to change. We will still be meeting eligible needs. We will still be talking to people about what their aspirations are. And as I say, those individual assessments will have to, pick up where, as I say, that 25%, as Lavelle's already said, the 25%, broadly speaking, in the experience of the financial assessment team, we find that does cover what in the guidance that is available to us would be allowed as a disability related expenditure. And as I say, I wish we were in a position where we were able to not have to think about the things where we're giving what we think is above that we are statutorily required to do. But Lavelle, I don't know if you want to come in a little bit more just around minimum income and ensuring that people have got enough to cover their needs.
Thank you, Councillor Nbi again. So in terms of our financial assessment, I think we follow strict guidelines from the Care Act and how other local authorities assess again for disability-related expenditure. And we will continue to do that. I think when people submit individual requests, we look at their individual circumstances and we come to an agreement most of the time in terms of what is it that they can afford to pay if they are really struggling financially. And we try and be equitable across the piece again to ensure that everyone is treated the same, recognizing that disabilities affect individuals in different ways. That's why it's a very difficult one in the sense that you have to look at each individual, how their disability affects them and what additional costs are incurred as a result of that disability. So that principle will not change. We are also seeing quite a number of people now using our online financial assessments, which is much quicker. And we are also, the team, I think, is equipped and has the resources to complete the reassessments that will be requested as we move forward.
Thank you. Before I come to Councillor Evans, and I know I'm not going to tread on your toes here because I know we just spoke about some of the questions, but unfortunately, I didn't print off my questions. I printed off the one, so I've been trying to write them again. So with that, I've got one observation and a quick question, and I'll go to Councillor Evans, come back to myself. Looking at these savings and so forth, one of the things, as I said earlier, I'm a trustee on Dickop Volunteer Drivers. We charge 45p a mile. When you bring these, if these charges are brought in, will you be collaborating with a lot of these volunteer drivers around? Because it might be cheaper for them to actually use them for visits. There's only an observation that I don't expect you to do it. But my question more is, or one of my questions was, I tried to do some research on this claim that we're 35% and we're going down 25%, which is the normal. All the councils I was finding, they all do like a flat rate, or they've got various different things. I couldn't find a host of councils that do 25% to back up that claim. And also, just on that point, I mean, we sit here in this people scrutiny meeting all the time talking about how amazing the Oxfordshire way is because we're better than other councils. And now we're setting the bar out. We want to be average with other councils. So I just want maybe Councillor Fletcher wants to come back on that point. Thank you.
I'll come back on your observation in the first instance, and actually I might bring Sam in here just in terms of transport. So I think that this is where I particularly feel very strongly that this is a policy review in terms of how do we support people to access exactly all of those things that are available in our very rich communities. So we know that people have, you know, a very obvious level, if you will, bus passes because they're able to use them. But again, if we are without rhyme or reason saying, oh, and also we have this transport option, then that doesn't feel very fair or equitable to people, you know, when they are able to access other things. Sam, I don't know if you want to comment a little bit there around transport and the alternatives that we use to look at.
I think you make a really good point, Councillor Snowden. I think absolutely. I think if this policy goes through in terms of the transport policy, we would be absolutely looking at what community resources there are as an alternative to local authority transport. I also think there's something around independent travel training as well. So we have My Life, My Choice, who provide independent travel training for people with a learning disability. And I know my colleagues in the transport department are bolstering independent travel training as well for young people with special educational needs. So I think it's absolutely right that actually if we're going to say that we expect people to look at alternatives, it's beholden on us to make sure we've got that knowledge to be able to signpost people to the right settings. So I think as part of, there's a whole, I think Victoria alluded to it earlier, there's a whole practice piece we need to do with our social workers to make sure that they've got the skills and knowledge to be able to signpost to appropriate alternatives, not just say no, this is the alternative. So no, I agree with your point.
And then I'll come back on your point around the benchmarking and the I just think it's important to note. So of the 43 authorities that responded in the NAFAO request, we've submitted that information to the committee so that's available for you to see. And what you'll note there is the number of authorities, as Lavelle outlined earlier, that actually don't have any allowance at all. So from our perspective and from an officer perspective, I would say that I hope that we are being proportionate but also supportive in our approach to what is a very difficult subject and a very difficult conversation by still retaining a flat rate where people do not have to submit onerous receipts. And there are councils that, you know, from our perspective, that where that is still, you know, common practice is that any disability related expenditure, every individual would have to submit their receipts to do so. So we are in this balance that we are trying to find, staying true to our values in trying to make it as straightforward as possible for people where we believe the vast majority will have their disability related expenditure needs met through that 25%, but still leaving that very clear pathway for individualised assessment.
That's fine, that's great. Yeah, so I completely agree with you. We do, quite rightly, we talk about how the Oxfordshire Way does make us better, and I'm really proud of it. And part of the reason I wanted this role is because I do think that what we are doing with the Oxfordshire Way is brilliant. We are in a position where, was it 2023, where you already cut a load of money from the budget, right? So we've already been through a process where we trimmed the fat. We are now at a point where we need to scrape meat off the bones. Like, that's where we are. That is what the funding is. So yes, as Emadi said, like in many ways, this is a savings exercise because we have to do a savings exercise. The reason that we are doing it as a policy review rather than just a blanket savings is because we want to try and be as equitable as possible. So this is not about being equal, it is about being equitable. So where people do need that extra 10%, they will still be able to get that 10%. Where people do need that free transport, they will be able to still get that free transport. But having this as a policy review is just laying out the principles by which we are going to try and make that happen, because, and I can't stress this enough, we have to save money. We have to do this. This is where we are. We are trying to do it in the fairest way that we possibly can. and I don't like it any more than anybody in this room likes it. But that is a position that we are in.
So just clarification, so you feel like we've exhausted all other areas, and this is where we're at.
This isn't the only way that we are going to be making savings, right? We still have other savings that we have to make. This is just part of it. It's not like we are coming for people with DRE requirements, and that's all we're doing. We are having to do this across every area of the service. It's just that this is the one that is coming now.
Councillor Evans was next. Thank you for your patience.
No problem. Thank you very much. So I have grave concerns about what is being proposed here, and I'm afraid on what I've seen so far, I can't agree that it's either fair or, in fact, sustainable for reasons that I'll explain. The first is that I agree with some of the comments from other councillors before. This does not feel like it's a policy-based review. It feels like it's an attempt to find savings. And I think, in fact, in the answer that we've just had, that becomes very evident. Because if this was a policy-based review, then all I could conclude is that the council has abandoned the Oxfordshire way, because this is, as a point of policy, totally inconsistent with it. If we look at things like transport, this is about supporting people to live independently and be able to get out and about where they need to go. Surely that would be consistent with the Oxfordshire way. If it's about disability-related expenditure, this is about helping people meet the additional costs of their disabilities. Surely doing that would be consistent with the Oxfordshire way. And if you look particularly at the telecare point, actually, I think it's most glaring, because surely helping people feel confident about living in their own home and helping people feel that they've got the technology and the assistance to call upon additional support at the moments that they would most need it, surely that is the essential quality of the Oxfordshire way. And to put financial barriers in the way people accessing that care is surely a rejection of that policy. So just at the outset, I'm afraid this does feel like it's all about savings and not about policy. And the policy proposals being made are, in fact, they jar with the Oxfordshire way rather than feeling compatible with it. Just some very particular questions I did want to ask. Building on those comments we just had before about efficiencies, even if you take the full year savings here, we're talking about 0.4% of the adult social care budget in totality that these three combined measures would save. I think it would only be conscionable to go ahead with it if we were totally satisfied that there was no waste that was equivalent to 0.4% of the budget that could avoid the people who will suffer from these consequences suffering from them. So I think it's really important to be totally satisfied as a committee that there is nowhere 0.4% worth of waste that could avoid the people who would be hit by these changes suffering from them. Secondly, in terms of the 35% to 25% reduction on the DRE, we've heard a great deal about how there will be assessments that could enable people still to get the support that they need. But fundamentally, what we're then talking about there is about introducing more bureaucracy into this process, is about making the life of people who have disabilities more bureaucratic, more administrative, if they're to get the support that they need. And we're also fundamentally talking about a shifting of resource from the council side, from money that in the past would have gone automatically to people with disabilities, will instead be being spent on additional assessments. And surely that is not a good use of council taxpayers' money. A final thing I just want to reflect upon and would welcome thoughts on is that what we're looking at here is a relatively small number of people in some cases who will suffer a great deal in consequence of these policies if they were to go through. So we've heard, for example, about a couple of occasions, and I'm sure a couple of occasions exist, they always will, where people who could find alternative transport provision instead are using the community support services transport option. But in the paperwork, we have 194 people who are using that service. If anything, that says to me that too few people are using community support services for transport than would actually be eligible for it if all of the people who were eligible for it were able to access that service. 194 people across Oxfordshire is a vanishingly small number of people. But given that from the figures, most of them are using that multiple times a week and would be hit with £10 each time that they used it, does it not feel like a small number of Oxfordshire residents are really going to take a disproportionate share of the burden of these cost-saving measures?
Okay, so So thank you, Councillor Evans, and there was obviously quite a lot in there. So in terms of, I'll start with the Oxfordshire Way, the telecare wastage, and then the number of people using, the number of people reported in the report. In terms of the Oxfordshire Way, I think that I share the sentiment of everybody that's spoken today in terms of this. This is not an easy discussion. It's not an easy position to be in as a deputy director of operations. This is not the position that I want to be in. As I said to Councillor Hannaby, I would love to be able to be sitting here saying our budget position enables us to be able to give more than is statutorily required of us. Councillor Hannaby, I think, laid out really well for us that additional 10%, which was an additional 10% on what we believe is required to cover disability related expenditure, was therefore, you know, for some of the additional well-being and activity-based needs that people have. They may well be the kinds of needs that sit out of what we are as an organisation statutorily required to provide. What I would say, and I bring it back to, there are a number of things that we do across the community to try to compensate and mitigate for that. Thinking about the community capacity grants, thinking about the way that we encourage people to be able to engage at low cost or no cost with their communities. But yes, there is no way, just on a very human level, that I think that this conversation or this consultation was ever going to be easy. It is a very difficult prospect to say we originally were able to increase this and now we've got to decrease this because of the funding envelope that we have and what the next 2 to 3 to 4 years look like. And it's incumbent on us as officers to ensure that we have got sustainability of those services moving forward. And while I absolutely contextually, when you talk about 0.4%, yeah, that sounds then like a tiny amount of money that, as you say, sounds like it could disproportionately impact. But the reality of it is that we have to find those 0.4% everywhere. We have to look across all of our services for exactly that reason, so that we don't disproportionately affect one group, we don't disproportionately affect one critical service, but that we spread and share what we have to do in terms of being able to balance the adult social care books. I think in terms of the number of people that we've cited in the paper, we've talked about the people in community support services, but in fact, the number of people in totality using transport or accessing transport, either on an ad hoc basis. So we've given you a very concrete number there around community support services, but we have people that maybe are coming in and out of transport services, that maybe get it on an ad hoc basis if they phone up, but don't necessarily have that as part of their support package. So I think that we need to understand that that the use of transport is quite widespread, but not organised in a way that is supported by policy to enable us to describe what our transport offer is. And I think that we also need to consider that when we do think about people that aren't able to make that contribution, we have documented in the proposals that the opportunity to apply for an exemption or a waiver if there's a temporary hardship do exist, and we will look at those. In terms of the efficiencies around the way that we financially assess and how we will manage that demand of individual assessment coming in, I would say that Lavelle and the team have done a phenomenal job over the last 18 months of really improving processes, of leaning their processes, of introducing the online financial assessment form. And what that enabled them to do was to reduce waiting times for financial assessment to virtually nothing. And of course, there will always be some people who say, well, it took 3 or 4 months for my assessment to be concluded, but that may be due to particular complexities for an individual or back and forth that sometimes happens because there is a great deal of detail needed. But in the main, we have absolutely worked incredibly hard to reduce any kind of waste in our processes and systems, and Lavelle and the team have done a great job there, and that has positioned them to be able to support individual assessment, because we've heard back from people like Oxfordshire Family Support Network that there are times when people really struggle to understand what potentially they could claim in terms of that disability related expenditure, and they need that additional support. So our priority committee has been, how do we build that capacity, whether it's 25% or 35% actually, how do we build that capacity to ensure that we can have people come in and we can talk to them individually, or we can visit them at home individually to consider their circumstances.
Back on out to all of you. Okay.
If I could just quickly, my concern about the last part of that answer is it didn't reflect the additional administrative burdens on people with disabilities about jumping through these hoops themselves. So whilst I'm grateful for the work that's been done to speed up the process, nevertheless, it is about putting more paperwork and more barriers in the way of people with disabilities to get the support that they need, which I have concerns about. Just a very quick question I wanted to focus on, in particular about the telecare, is that if we're looking at supporting people to live independently, I think the telecare is very important. I also think it's important if we're thinking about how do we actually prevent larger costs of care from being incurred. I mean, if we were to imagine that, let's say, somebody who lives in one of the villages that I represent who is of an age and of a demographic where they think it's worth having some of these devices, and they were to opt out of that scheme due to additional costs, if that person were then to suffer from, say, a stroke and not get the medical intervention that they need in a timely way, then quite possibly the consequences of that could go from fairly mild to catastrophic. And therefore, the additional costs of providing care for that person in the longer term could be much, much greater than if we'd supported them with what is in effect a relatively small cost. We're looking at £9 or so a week to make sure that they were in a position to get the faster care that they needed to minimise those longer term costs. So is there not a concern that some of these could in fact be false economies on that basis?
Thank you, Councillor. I think these are really valid questions and things that we have given a lot of thought to. I think one of the things with telecare, as Lavelle outlined, is not a statutory service that we have to provide. That said, we recognise it as a really effective tool as part of, perhaps as part of a statutory package, as part of something where somebody's assessed needs, as actually this is going to enable this overall package of care to work for this individual, then that is a slightly different viewpoint. But again, in the absence of a policy position on this, what we have in Oxfordshire is a system whereby we have telecare that's been issued to people who maybe don't need it at all, maybe have alternative methods of the way that the technology has moved on. And we know that a lot of families, for instance, the use of Amazon Alexas in homes and so on and so forth has really accelerated, and people don't necessarily. So if somebody's not receiving a support service through adult social care, but they have somehow through lack of policy and procedure direction ended up with a telecare system, we quite often find that sometimes they're setting, alarms get set off accidentally, or they become a nuisance, or we get people that phone and say, this is a bit of a nuisance now, I don't want this anymore. And so we do, as I say, we need to have a position whereby how are we using this resource? How are we issuing this to people? Because it's not, it simply can't be just a universal, because unfortunately we don't have the when you talk about efficiency, we don't have the position to be able to just universally issue telecare equipment to people.
I'm just going to come in on that one point because I was going to ask that question as well. So have we done any research into one of the questions of conversation? Will you give up using telecare if the cost is brought in? Because I'm just thinking, my mother and father, they're that generation where my dad is unwell, he's 90, and he would definitely take it if he was on his own. My mother's the generation, she can certainly afford it, but it's like anything, she'll carry, if she's forgotten a carrier bag, she'll carry her stuff because she wants to save 40p type of thing. So I just worry that people who really do need it won't use it because it's their generation. When our generation gets to that age, we will be able to use Alexa and Siri and so forth. So going back to the point, Councillor Evans, which I was going to say is, have we done any impact analysis on how much it's going to cost us if people turn and say, well, I can afford it, but actually, do you know, I'm not going to have it, and then they fall and it costs a lot more.
Thank you. And again, another good question. I mean, some of the, as I've just alluded to in my last answer, one of the main reasons that we find that pendant alarms, for instance, are pushed is because they have been set off by accident, or and again, when we talk about efficiency, this one is quite significant, or that it's the provider running a test call to see that the equipment is working. And those two things form the largest actual impact that we have in terms of telecare at the moment. So where people need telecare, and this is really important, where they need it, where as part of their assessment, or whether it's part of people leaving hospital and needing to understand what their needs are as part of that Home First and reablement package, we will still provide it, and we will still provide it within an overarching package of support. But where, as I say, we have individuals that have maybe just have a legacy that doesn't really, a legacy telecare system that doesn't really meet a need, or is one of those being set off by accident, or people or its primary uses where we're testing to see whether it works. We need to, we do need to review and revise that. There have been other areas that have looked at this and introducing a flat charge. Lancashire did this and saw a 50% drop, but what they didn't see was an increase in safeguarding events or admissions.
Councillor Hannaby next, and then.
Yeah, I've listened. And I have, as was a cabinet member, I do have some sympathies about this, but on this one occasion, I really do believe we need to have, well, let's see what as I always say, let's see what the consultation bring back. But I would like us to at least have another look at this, and do we need to take that 10%? That's my worry. When I decided on the 35, the cost of living was reasonably high then. My goodness, look at the cost of living it is now for people. Everything's going up: water, electric, gas, everything's going up, and it's the proportions really of the cuts really that you want to make. But I'm sympathetic about it because I know what's going on in the background. But this is the most vulnerable of people. My life, my choice, excellent at getting people moving, using buses, etc. But that's only a minority. And as you Chair, you do voluntary driving, so you know yourself how important it is to get people active and moving, etc. It's all about our elderly people not sitting at home and getting ill, etc. It's about giving them a quality of life, and I believe that I would like to think that when the consultation comes back, we can take another look at this. Thank you.
Really, so can I just go to Councillor Harrod hasn't spoken yet? Sorry.
Right. Thank you, Chair. I think what I've got to say now is more of a preamble, a long preamble rather than a question, because I think a lot of the questions I was going to ask have been addressed. They've been asked and addressed. You have been given a hard time, rightly so, because that's what scrutiny and overview is for, in a constructive way, and difficult decisions should be scrutinised closely, and this must be a hugely difficult decision. I don't doubt that. I've actually got, having listened to the presentations and followed the arguments closely, the debate closely, I actually have a huge amount of sympathy with you. I don't think for a minute you want to be here with this proposal. We often, as councillors, have to explain to residents that, around 70% of the council's income is spent on statutory adults and children's services. It leaves very little for non-statutory services. It's a hugely difficult position for councils to be in, and I fully appreciate there just isn't the resource to fund everything we want to fund, and ultimately as a council you have to be in a sound financial position or you can't fund anything. So I do have a huge amount of sympathy for you, and appreciate this is about trying to find a sensible financial position, and I do appreciate the arguments. I'm reassured by the equity arguments, if you like, that people who do need the help will be getting that help, and that's something that I think we have to hold on to and will need lots and lots of information on going forward. I was going to ask, what other options have you looked at to arrive at this? And I think that probably has been discussed in some detail, and that there are lots of proposals that you're having to look at making, and that it's taken a lot of research to reach where you are now. I think I was going to ask if you'd kind of gone into the kind of lean management approach of looking at all efficiencies across the kind of administrative angle. I think you have addressed that to some extent. If you'd like to give more information on that, then I think it's always relevant. But I think really what I've come down to now. Oh, and also, have you liaised and researched with other councils who are in a similar position? I wanted to touch on that. I think really my ultimate question now is going to be, will you be, if this proposal goes forward following consultation, will you be giving personal and individual attention to those users of the services, if you like, that you feel may be most exposed? Are we going to have that kind of individual attention to detail on our clients, on our vulnerable users? And I think that's where we need to put the attention, because there have been lots of questions about what about this group, what about that group. So I think the attention does need to be on that individual case by case basis, if I may say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heritage. And I think that's, on that final point, you're absolutely right. And this is, part of consultation is to have that feedback around actually how do we make this as easy as possible for people if they believe that their disability related expenditure is not adequate, their allowance is not adequate to meet their needs. And this is something that, as I say, irrespective of this consultation, it's a piece of work that we have been working on with Oxfordshire Family Support Network, who are fabulous in their critical friend approach to us, and in giving us feedback direct from people with lived experience about how difficult they find it to navigate the system. And so to that end, we've been undertaking a piece of work anyway to review all of our letters to ensure that they have a slightly clearer explanation of how the assessment is broken down. We will be strengthening sort of about how do you get support if you are not satisfied with the outcome of this assessment. And certainly for those individuals, as I say, we can take it away to look at how we get that communication out about how you come back in for the individualised assessment. But it is something we are absolutely committed to, because as we as a team have talked about all the way through the consultation, we do not want to leave. We're not going to leave somebody in a safeguarding situation because they believe that they cannot any longer afford their care. We will work with them to ensure that we are able to fully address the circumstances.
Thank you. I was going to say, I think that's absolutely. I mean, I know I went back to. I mentioned the sort of hand holding in a previous presentation, but I think that is key, because it has been suggested that. Sorry, I've carried on talking and I shouldn't, but it has been suggested that there could be more admin for use. But I think that's what we need to be reassured on, that people who need it are not going to lose out, and that we will be holding their hand through this process, and it won't just be a form filling exercise. It will be we are working with you exercise. Thank you.
Right, thank you for your patience. Yeah.
Firstly, I still want to thank you. You've done a good job. I listened to your presentation, but I will still have to emphasize that all the reasons why we're asking this question is about fairness and equity. And I've sat in the chambers 3 different times where I've been told it's going out for consultation and this is the likely effect that will happen. And 3 different times, what has happened is different. So can you assure me, for everything you've been saying, that you said, we're going to do individual assessments, there will be no unintended consequences from this? Because we've heard it before, that it's got out for consultation, whatever comes, we're going to follow it. It never happens. This is a new ball game altogether, because these are the most vulnerable people in our society. Those are the people we actually do need to look after. Taking I guess it was not a Christmas present you gave to them when it was 25% to 35%. You did it for a reason. You did it for a reason to bring it. Now we're taking it back. The reasons why we're taking it back is the 1.4%, as Councillor Evans just said. That's the savings we get. Are we sure it is worth the risk to take? That's the question I really want to leave our minds with. Thank you.
So I think that, as I've outlined earlier, this was not an easy position or decision to come to, and I can only reiterate that again, is we would all rather not be having this conversation. In terms of, is it necessary? I would just again go back to my earlier point. While it's 0.4%, it is 0.4% that we have to find across a variety of areas, and to not do it and to not take that approach would require us to be looking at, 5% here or 10% there, or and on it would go. So we have to distribute those savings or that income generation. We have to distribute that as fairly as possible. In terms of unintended consequences, again, I welcome Lavelle to come in a moment on this, but we have undertaken so many financial assessments over the years, the individualised assessments. We do need to remember that benefits also do rise, maybe not in as much as everybody would like, but benefits also rise each year. The 25% we believe will cover the majority of evidential, as in the disability related expenditure that we are required to disregard. We believe it will cover it. So that individualised assessment, as I say, that will be, of course, for people to make a judgment about, is that covering mine? Or do I think I've got more than has been allowed in what's been laid out in front of me? And that's the bit, as I say, if they think no, we will go back in and do those individualised assessments. I'll probably pause to let Lavelle talk about the outcome of some, because this is your bread and butter day work.
Thank you, Victoria. Every year when benefits go up in April, we reassess everyone. And if this proposal is put forward, we will reassess everyone as well. And if people submit their evidence that their disability-related expenditure is above the 25%, we will again reassess that. I think we understand that some people are in difficult financial situations, and before we accept, anyone handing back their package of care or declining to receive telecare or anything like that, we will have those conversations with them to ensure that all the risks are addressed. I think all our social workers carry out risk assessments to ensure that people remain safe. I think safety is our priority when we work in adult social care, and we will continue to ensure that all people who are affected by this will be supported throughout the process. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Hannabury.
So, as I say, I have great sympathy for all of you, and I know that you're having to do this because we have to make some savings. But I think we are here because of former decisions, I think, or not decisions. The way the previous governments have not got to grips with this situation. And this is the problem. It's putting us as councillors, we're here, we become councillors to help our residents. I mean, this is really quite heartbreaking, I think, today. I think this is one of my worst days I've ever had as a councillor, town, district and county. I think it really is, because it's hitting or will possibly hit some of the most vulnerable. But we have to understand that we are not financed in the way we should be to look after our people. So I will hopefully, Chair, when the consultation comes back, I'm hoping that we will be taking another look at it, if you agree, and let's see, if we can do something maybe less or accepting, and maybe we might find some savings in some other directorate or something, because we really have to be so serious about this well. Thank you.
We are here to give recommendations still at this point, because this is the time we can still influence the decision. You know what I mean? Rather than bring it back after a decision's been made. Yeah. I mean, I personally, just looking at the telecare thing, for example, I mean, I go back to my initial point of my mum and dad can afford it, but there's a good chance, and I've got a lady, I've done her hair for years, and she's 99, and she's as tight as an old so-and-so, and I can just see someone like that 99-year-old saying no because she doesn't, you know, it's a matter of principle to them. And I just wonder whether, I know it's the telecare, it's being charged for everyone. Is there no possibility, I don't know what the age limits are, you know, someone like everyone over 90 doesn't have to pay it regardless of their wealth, because unfortunately, you know, even if it's a millionaire falling over because he or she is too tight to pay the thing above, it's still a resident of this county, you know, and 19-year-olds don't know how to use Alexa at home yet. You know what I mean? So I for me, I think if that's a simple little thing, there can't be that many elderly people who refuse it, and or even why not offer them the ones who want to pay, because there'll be wealthy 90-year-olds who will be quite happy to pay. But rather than the ones just to lose it, I think I'd be heartbroken to hear that some wealthy person is just out of principle, but they didn't want to spend the money. They, you know, because no benefits are going up, but the cost of living's going up a lot as well, very quickly. So that's my point. But has anybody got any final thoughts on this before I throw Tom under the bus and ask him to write out any recommendations he's heard?
Chair, I've just seen now, again, rereading what happens after the consultation. I think this is really going to be the core of listening to our people, and we will we will carefully consider everything people tell us through the consultation, and I do hope that that is exactly what we do, and I hope that we'll have a chance to bring this back to scrutiny to make sure that you have.
Thank you. Tom?
Okay, so I've tried to sort of synthesize the discussion rather than sort of follow every suggestion. In terms of framing this as a policy, I sort of got the idea that you really wanted a greater sort of clarification over the policy objectives, and for the Cabinet to explain how the amendments that are being proposed are actually going to further these policy objectives versus A, the status quo, and B, alternative levels of reductions to funding. The point about administrative burden, simply evaluate the cost benefit of the increased administrative burden of the proposals, as well as the impacts on users, so highlighting that. And the third one that was just mentioned, provide evidence that the proposed telecare savings are not a false economy, and make alternative mitigation suggestions. Are those sort of, do those kind of cover what you?
Are we going to say anything about the transport situation, which you know, a lot of people rely on, or I mean, I just am putting it in there because we have discussed it.
What would you like specifically to say to Cabinet around transport? I'm happy to. I will do it as the committee wishes. I just.
I was wondering, at the end of the consultation, will we have the opportunity to see what it is before?
Well, it will go to Cabinet. So we'll see the results before it go to Cabinet. But this is our chance to.
One of the chances to know that whatever the result is.
Yeah.
Would Cabinet for once listen to what the consultation says?
Well, I don't think I certainly can't, but I don't think Councillor Fletcher will be able to tell you what they're going to decide on the day.
Yeah. You have to listen. They never listen.
Are we happy with those recommendations? Councillor Evans?
So just say check. Can we bring it back to this committee if Cabinet is minded after the close of consultation in order to go ahead with this? Can we bring it back to this committee as part at that stage?
Well, we can do that, but that, you know, sort of, it'd be ideal if we could influence their decision making before they make the decision rather than slate it after they've made the decision.
No, that's great. I think Tom's captured.
So I'm just trying to get as much information as we can now for recommendations so that I can present it to Cabinet before they make the decision. And then we can, of course, call a decision, you know, the decision can come back in. I mean, presumably we could call it in, can we?
It could be called in, but it is always preferable to do it in a planned way because call-ins are difficult for everyone to arrange. You as members, the cabinet member, and the officers. So if it can be arranged by discussion, that would be far preferable.
That's the idea. Is that we can add value to the conversation of the cabinet and make a decision that we're all happy with. I mean, if 100% of the consultation comes back saying they're against it and the cabinet go, well, we're doing it anyway, then yes, we can call a decision in before scrutiny. That's right. Yeah. Happy with those recommendations, and as I said, we'll still be working on the wording. So if you do have a epiphany tonight and you want to add something to it, then just contact myself and Ben or Tom. Okay, lovely. Right, then we'll move on to item 8 on the agenda, the committee forward work plan. Has everyone had a look at this? Are we happy with what we got down? Anything you'd particularly like to add? Councillor Barlow has written to me with some other ideas. Councillor Evans.
One thing I would like us to take a look at is the disabled facilities grant. I'm conscious it's something where the county and the district councils have to work together, and the opportunities for delay is one of my principal concerns, but also other things to go wrong for people, particularly say if somebody's in a situation of having a degenerative condition with a relatively short-term prognosis. I think it's important for this committee to understand how the disabled facilities grant is working at the moment, both at the county council level and then in terms of the relationships with the district and the city council. So I'd be very keen for us to take a look at that.
I think there is. So we do not administer the DFGs. We passport the money through effectively. So I think there is. We probably need to think about that a little bit in terms of how that. And then I guess the specifics in terms of what from the county council perspective we would be bringing to scrutiny versus district.
So Chair, my understanding is that, for example, the assessments would be done by the county council.
Yes, but their recommendation, occupational therapy recommendation assessments.
Sure. I mean, my concern, for example, is that let's say that somebody is diagnosed with MND and they therefore need large-scale adaptations to their home. The MND Association recommend that they should be completed within 4.5 months in order to reflect the progressive nature of the condition. If there are, for example, delays in terms of the assessments at the county council side, that would necessarily delay the timescale for the district or the city council implementing the consequences of that assessment. So I do think I recognise, as I said in my opening remarks, it's a split function between the county and the districts and the city council. But I do think the county council's role in that, in terms of the assessment they make, is very important and a reasonable thing for the committee to look at.
Yeah, I think in terms of the county councils, absolutely. In terms of the county council's involvement, I think actually though that would be a broader thing around waiting lists and waiting times, because in fact it's in comparison to all of the work that we undertake in terms of waiting times and so on, that forms a very small part of, contextually, forms a very small part. So it would be quite a brief update in terms of, as I say, those assessment times for occupational therapy.
An update on it, like a note on the.
So
I'm afraid I'd really like it to come to the committee. I don't mind if it's brief. I would just really like to see a report that looks at the figures on it so that we can actually delve into the detail.
We'll be able to add any value to that. I mean, as a decision. I mean, I've got a situation like that with casework at the moment where, because SODC, OCC, occupational therapy, everyone, and the poor person in the middle is writing email after email. So I know there's frustration, but I don't know whether it's more OCC than district council that's causing the bottleneck, if you like. Can we discuss that?
Yeah. Should we take that offline and have a
Is that-
discussion about how we could make that work?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
Go back and forth. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Evans. And any further? No,
Chair, if I could just step in and a note was passed to me by Ben before the meeting to say that the CQC response and transformation report that was supposed to come to this meeting is coming in September, and his advice is that you might want to leave some space on the work programme to allow for anything coming out of that you might want to go into a bit more of a deep dive. So it may be best not to make huge changes to what you're doing, so that you have the flexibility to look at things coming out of that.
Okay. Up on anything, you can do, as always, just contact email. Okay. Item 9 is the action and recommendation tracker at the back there. Our recommendations were rejected regarding the Oxfordshire unpaid carers strategy, and I only presented the domestic abuse income. Oh, yeah. That wouldn't go.
I'm not sure that would come here. That would either be performance and corporate services, which is my normal one, or place. So yeah, you come kind of bottom of the list as close as that might come.
Right. So anything issues to raise on the action? Don't think so. Recommendation tracker, no, just information, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. And then item 10 finally is just the cabinet response at the back there to the aforesaid motion. So okay, right. Well, with that, it's been a long and very contrasting meeting. But thank you very much for the officers for your time. Thank you very much, and thank you, Becca, for being in the room. Cabinet member, and especially thank you very much to Councillor Hannaby for giving up the chance to be at a brewery today. All right, to attend with us. So thank you all so much. Just don't save the chat until we're offline.